Happy Sunday, Smite fans. Gormiser's going to repeat exactly what he just said live on camera here in just a moment. Welcome in to the final day of week number 4
Why would you lie to him
of
like
Season
that?
9 of the Smite Pro League. Nothing else I've said is a lie, though. And you know what else isn't a lie? All the great value you get with your Prime membership. You get free games. Remember, a new batch of free games this month here in July will be, it's already there, but we'll be letting you know about them shortly. Free delivery, free in-game content, free subscriptions, a whole lot more. All of that and more with your Prime membership. So thanks again to Prime for being with us here in Season 9 of the Smite Pro League. One thing I also didn't lie about is Gormiser being with me to start the day. God, those arms are looking great, Gor.
Thanks,
keep
man.
it up. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. Happy to be here, though. Look, we've had an exciting weekend of SPL up to this point. Some very anticipated matchups. And I think 3 really exciting games to look forward through here today. Leviathans, Scarabs, Jade Dragons, Titans, Kings, and Oni Warriors. So, pretty back and forth, I think, in our final 3 sets of the week.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you haven't been watching as closely lately that, you would probably think, oh, man, you're coming into this. All Dragons and Titans will be exciting, but what about the others? The Warriors King set is actually maybe the one I'm most excited for based on what the Warriors have been able to do. But I even think this first one has some interesting, at least play behind it. More so that I'm curious as to what the Leviathans are going to do. They've been on an absolute tear the last 4 sets they played. Last 3 sets they played have been wins for them. Very impressive wins as well. Kings, Bolts, and then yesterday they got their win over the Valks. And so if they can continue that route, you're looking for a team that is, now pushing and vying for top 2 spots in the SBL, which is insane to go from 6th, barely like struggling, losing to the Valks in Phase 1, which was the new team to the league. A very kind of disruptive thought process for a team that was the world champions, and instead being able to climb forward towards the top is really fun.
Yeah, I think that's a worthwhile storyline with this team where if you want to look at a front-loaded versus back-loaded schedule, going up against the Scarabs, the Valkyries, a couple of the lower teams in the league, at the end means that you're going against all of the other top 6 teams earlier on in the phase. And so in those types of back-and-forth matchups, coin tosses, things like that, doesn't necessarily go the Leviathans' way. But you are absolutely right. Then they still play the Kings and the Bolts, who at the time were undefeated, and look near unstoppable against those teams as well. And it really gorgeous. It feels like a team. I mean, this is such a vague kind of overarching statement, but really has just found its footing again. I think after Phase 1, the ups and downs, the world's hangover, whatever you want to call it, I think the team just needed some time to refocus. Look, we just won Worlds. Maybe we can roll into Phase 1 and just do it again, right? And I think it maybe took a little bit of time for this team to finally realize, oh yeah, we're in one of the most competitive league states we've ever been in. We need to refocus. We need to figure out the meta for ourselves, and really at the forefront of a lot of that has been their solo lane in Jarcorrr.
Yeah, I think that we've gotten to see a much more comfortable meta. It is very interesting to watch this team as they adapt, because once again, and this was very similar to last year, they will play the top 5 gods, right? If it's just like, hey, here's a blanket tier list for mid, blanket tier list for carry, et cetera, they'll just play those gods, and they'll play it better than you because their team fight's going to be stronger. I think yesterday what we saw from the Valks is a little bit of some questions about the early game for the Leviathans. I think that their farm was pretty on point, but some of the fights weren't necessarily going their way. So that's a spot that I think the Scarabs are going to be able to lean into, is maybe trying to take advantage of that first 10 minutes right now and maybe sit. Admittedly, it's sitting on Zap might not be the best thing for you because it feels like the team has planned for that, but trying to shut down the rest of them are very difficult. This guy right there, as you had mentioned, Jarcorrr, has really gotten to flourish because all of a sudden Ardio's back in the meta, which was a god that he was incredibly good with. Alongside, we've been seeing more Kukulkans, things like that. And so there's a lot that I think have really reinforced the Leviathans here going into that after, like you said, a few weeks of workshopping.
You know what's difficult is for their opponents in the Solar Scarabs, and we'll talk about Scary D, that solo lane matchup, but if you look at the Scarabs as a whole, this team has been consistent in their ability to get to 3 games, right? That's the story with the Solar Scarabs. They've gone 3 games in every single set they've played, except for the Kings, where they were 2-0'd. Except they lose in Game 3 against every single team except for the Valkyries. And so now they'll go up against the Atlantis Leviathans to end their and the halfway point here in the phase. And I do think it's worth looking at Scary D and the growth that he's had with this team. Definitely had growing pains in phase 1. Haven't necessarily seen the world champion, world-beating Scary D style of performances.
No, not yet.
And I think that could still be in there, and the Solar Scarabs will look great whenever we're able to get that out.
I think that with the rise of what we've been seeing lately, we're seeing a lot of like Raven play right here. I think that, with Raven kind of shying away a little more so far this week and some of the Guardians becoming a little more prevalent, we actually might see more of a rise out of Scary D. I expect this set should be pretty eye-opening, whether or not it's going to be the good kind of eye-opening or maybe the bad kind of eye-opening, has yet to be seen. But I think that this is going to be a good set where we get to see, a little more punch from the solo lane and a little bit more. And, much to as you had mentioned, always going to game 3s, things like that. Scarabs have been able to take a couple of games off of the Leviathans in the past, but, they're the only team that does not have a set win against them, as at least in the last 2 years. So that is something to try and drag forward out of them here is, having that motivation, being able to lean on it. We're talking a lot about the jungle. I think talking about the solo lane, they have the pressure to potentially get themselves that lead necessary. And while it might still take them 3 games, yep, I think they do have the capabilities to take down this Leviathan squad right now.
Yeah, I mean, if we were putting odds on a set like this, the odds of it going 3 games just because the Scarabs are in it seem like it's nearly at an all-time high. Scary D, the solo laner for the Solar Scarabs, again, joining this team at the beginning of this year, has been up and down with the rest of the Solar Scarab squad, but how do they feel about their matchup against the Atlantis Leviathans? Find out in this interview.
I feel like we're a really good momentum-based team, so whenever everyone's on the same page and we just get things rolling, and we just need a couple wins to get the fire lit, in my opinion. In this matchup, what phases of the game is important? I feel like that doesn't really matter for the team that we're playing specifically, because more for us, traditionally, I think we've always been a very early game team, and we're really good at just dominating them in the early game, so I think for us, we just need to work on our mid and late game, and a lot of our games are going 2-1, so if we can do that, I think we can pull out a couple wins. Oh, if we had to ban 5 gods from one player in the Levi's, it would definitely be Sheento. That guy's crazy. He's goated. Who on the Levi's do I think has really stepped up this year? In my opinion, I feel like they just play really well as a team. It's a collective effort from them, all 5 of them. They're just on the same page and making the right calls and doing the same thing. It's good for them.
Now, if you're a Scarabs fan, I think you're happy with one specific thing, and at least for me, I'm happy with one specific thing that I heard from Scary D there, and it's that what phase of the game is most important. In his opinion was, Gore, that it doesn't matter because our best phase is the early game. Yeah. And so if we can roll over them in the early game, which we as a Scarabs team feel like we can do, then we've got a good chance of winning this set. And so that, I think, is important, realizing that if you play your game and feeling like if you play your game, then you can win. Now, eventually, you got to realize maybe how you've been playing your game isn't good enough to close out sets, and that's a whole different conversation. But having the confidence to say, here's where our strong point is, and here's how we're going to win, I think a good start.
Well, I think that's where, and this conversation becomes incredibly important to me, is that looking at what these two teams have done. Yesterday's a good example. Farm is still there for the Leviathans, even if some of the early game fight hadn't been there. And then in game 2 versus the Valks, they didn't even worry about the fights. But that's where they said they were the weakest. They said that if in their interview with the Valks, they were like, if they're going to beat us, it's going to be in lane phase. We're going to be better at team fights. That goes just as well there as it does here. If the Scarabs are going to beat them, it's going to be in the lane phase, but the Leviathans are just better at team fights. And so, much like Scary D says, play your early game. You know that it's your strongest, but you have to get a lead and then not fumble the hell out of it. That's been the biggest problem for the Scarabs is, getting to the late game and then taking a couple of bad fights or somebody getting picked a little early on in a position they shouldn't have been. I think the entire squad has been looking good. They've all had great moments. You've gotten great play from Stuart, Boronic, Screammmmm, the 2 frontliners as well, but there's always a moment where it just feels like somebody wasn't on the same page as the other 4. And that crumbles their late game team fight and things like that. So I think that right now, right here, it's not just get yourselves ahead, but in 20 minutes, I don't want to see you falling behind in gold anymore. I want to see you take that lead and push it as far as it can.
And that's equally, that's potentially more terrifying against the Leviathans, who are a team that not always, but oftentimes played the opposite, where the early game will at least
Like,
be
they don't
slow.
care. They've been
Right.
down 10,000
Right.
gold and still fought back.
Right, right. The Leviathans, they are a very capable early game team. Because I think that's been the conversation. If you zoom way out and look at the Leviathans as a team since the Sanguine days, since Season 7,
Yeah.
Season 8, they were only late game, only team fight, consistent team play for like all of Season 7, it felt like. Season 8 felt a bit more diverse. Here in Season 9, feels like a team, depending on how they draft, can really do a lot of both, but still have that core in the late game team fight, the shot calling and those types of moments being one of their strong suits. And so, yes, the Leviathans can win in the early, but they will still take you late, and they'll still beat you down if you end up getting there. We'll catch up, though, with picks and pans for game number 1. ESET, Capri, Uller, all banned out against the Levis. ESET and Uller, those two together, have been a very strong team comp for the Leviathans. And on the flip side, Bastet away from Scream, Yamoja from Inbound, and then AMC likely taken away from Boronic. Chernobog, Gore, has been one of the strongest picks for Stuart here as of late. And Stuart has been one of the strongest Scarabs in general. And so limiting that, always going to be a good start.
I mean, being able to grab this pick and having versatility. Look, it's been a few weeks since we've seen it, but he was played in solo, and I think can still showcase some of those capabilities if needed. Probably not the most likely, but still something you can do. Chernobog's been played in mid. Chernobog's been played over there in the duo lane. I personally prefer the side lanes just because if you're going to use that ult and it's going to get you anywhere on the map, having it get you as far as possible, you can go over to solo, might just be the bigger deal, but also having less travel time in the air if you're in mid is a really, really comfortable position for them. But, very similar. It's just when Uller's gone, which, by the way, 100% win rate for the Leviathans, love getting rid of that. And then you have no AMC, who's the Stinger. It's literally Stinger plus he hits really hard, but Stinger is the limelight. That is what he's bringing to the table. I think once you get rid of those, you really fall into the question of, okay, what carries are going to be at the top of the crop? And it's been Chernobog.
Yeah, Chernobog has absolutely been there. Erlang Shen, one of the most popular junglers in the league. Also very good pick for Scream. Haven't seen it in the last 6 games, though. 3 games against the Dragons, 3 games against the Titans. Wouldn't you guess it? Haven't seen that for Scream in the last couple of sets they've played. And then Robin was a good pick for Scary D for a little while there, Gore. But there's potentially a concern that if you're building this damage mitigation style of pick and Robin, late in the game is when that comes online, where it's so hard to deal with. Sure, you can deal damage in the laning phase, and you can be difficult. But are you worried that a team who wants to fight, scrap, get ahead early is potentially slowing that down, or do you think there could be some pressure to build up over?
I mean, I think if you have an Erlang and a Ravana, you have potential, like you said, to scrap super early if you wanted. Not with the way that build was going, though, right? Like you said, it's been very slow going. It's been very, honestly, weaker the last week or so that we've gotten to see out of it. Teams know how to play against it a little bit better. And so we've seen it falter to the point where a lot of these teams aren't banning it or picking it versus, last week and the week before, where it was really kind of taking everyone over by thunder. I think we saw it. Bolt's Titans banned it a lot because it was something that SOT had worked with earlier this week. But outside of that, I'm really struggling. I'm reading through all of them, and there's not a whole lot of Ravana since then. No. So some of the top teams still using it. And maybe this will be the pick for Scary D, but I think with an Osiris, presumably, in my mind, whether it goes jungle or if it goes solo, he's going to be able to have a lot more pressure early on, I think, than the Ravana. At least, first couple of levels might be a toss-up, but I think in the jungle over the Erlang Shen, you're going to have someone who at least keeps pace and is fighting well. Then you've got a Huang that really balances you out and elevates the Leviathans there. So I think that right now what I'm seeing from the Scarabs does have me a little shaky about what their strategy is going to be.
You know what I really liked? If this does end up being Osiris jungle, I don't know lots of speculation here. This is just a shout out to Lasbra yesterday. I really liked the stone cutting start on Osiris, and then Golden Blade after that. Slowed down his clear a little bit, but he just did so much damage in the first couple of levels of that game. And so there, depending on which of the Katana tree items you want to build, potentially can change up your pace a little bit. Gore, I don't know if Camazotz really helps you much here as far as deciphering jungle versus solo.
Honestly.
In the past, though, it feels like Jarcorrr has played Camazotz a bit. Was one of the strongest picks for him during the Worlds run for the Atlantis Leviathans, so maybe I lean Camazotz solo a bit more, but Osiris has been really strong there. Flexibility either way.
And that's exactly what I was thinking. Was like worst case scenario, you can change it up if you need to. If it turns out they're about to lock in somebody that you absolutely don't want to, or anything like that. But at the same time, I think that in the meta right now, with the way that a lot of these builds are going in, specifically if you're going up against a Ravana, and you're pretty damn certain that you're going to, I think Camazotz is going to be able to come into that lane and feel really solid. You've got great safety in this pick. Jarcorrr is one of the best at playing Camazotz in the solo, to the point where, again, it was a very deadly combo when he got this pick. It was almost a necessary ban against the Leviathans last year. And I think Osiris, especially if you put him in the jungle, is going to get a lot more hands-on earlier than what you're going to see. I think I see Huang Osiris. I'm scared of that potential. I don't want to fight in mid lane. I want to let them have it for a little, especially if I'm Merlin. Right? Yeah, so you're falling back. I think Camazotz can stay over off onto the side and then still do what he did last year and what we expect out of him. He's going to be able to chase you down. He's going to be able to get good damage, and he's going to be able to survive through the fights. And all the big question marks around it are just going to be, is it going to be tanky enough? Earlier this year, when this was attempted, it didn't have the same presence as it did at the end of Season 8. So that's only the big transition. But in 9.5, everybody's doing a little bit more of that, right? So I expect a lot of that and a lot of success here for the Leviathans from the solo lane.
Feels like the Scarabs, I mean, they have a draft where in areas they can find early aggression. I mean, Erlang Shen's really got to be it, right?
Erlang
Shen. With Scream and the way Scream likes to play. I mean, that conversation always ends up fumbling back to the junglers, because just the way laning phase has now started to build out. The hunters just kind of chill in lane until they're level 20. Solo laners tend to do the same. So yes, a lot of that falls back on the junglers. And Erlang Shen able to get active early in the game. But also, for what it's worth, if the Solar Scarabs do end up going late in this game, Raven hyper tanky with the damage mitigation build. Chernobog's been really good for Stuart. Merlin great in the late game.
Yes.
But Gore, what are we talking about on the other side?
You've got a Freya, a Huang, an Osiris, and a Horus. Like, even glancing over the Camazotz and all of that, that's 4 gods I don't want to deal with in the late game. I think that's going to be, the biggest question for them. The Horus pick, I think, is really good, because not only is it helpful at locking down in that lane, and we'll probably get to see a little bit of that warrior scaling early on. It lets him be a little more pressurized, so it can help out, especially with the Freya buff. But then late game, you're shredding prots, and you're shredding prots in front of a mage that does a lot of damage in a very tight area, as well as roots, and Freya. And so that is going to make it so that these 2 hard hitters are hitting even harder, and that's not even including Osiris if he chooses to get in there, the slows, the tether, the tankiness there. And so I think that you've put a lot of interesting concepts here, and a lot of it, I think, very similar to Scarab strategy. Depends on the Erlang Shen, right? If Scream has a really good early game, that's going to help the team go into a good mid-game, good late game. But how well do they all hold on to that? I think we've seen in the past, Scream can have a really great game, Stuart can have a really great game, but the other 3 have been just on the side of inconsistent enough that it's not a guaranteed setup for them going into that late game fight.
And I do think back to one thing that Scary D said in that pregame interview, and it's how momentum-based he feels like this Solar Scarab squad is. If they can get some wins rolling, then you might see a totally new look at a Scarabs team going into the rest of Phase 2, going into Phase 3 later in the year. And it's sets like this that can really spark that for a team. So I think even if you don't end up getting a win here in Game 1, I mean, it's all but guaranteed we go 3, it feels like, with the Solar Scarabs team.
Yeah.
At least looking competitive. Because I do think, or if you're zooming out and looking at the Scarabs team, they have smoothed out some of the issues they faced in the past. So the Solar Scarabs and the Atlantis Leviathans will go toe-to-toe in game number 1.
For the Solar Scarabs, getting a win today would be a huge boon for their team for the remainder of this phase. It'd be a good way for them to end the first half, but the Leviathans have been on the rise in these last 2 weeks of play. So it's going to be a tough one no matter what for the Scarabs to find a win here. It's J-Mac, Mifflin, and Doug in game number 1 between the Scarabs and the Leviathans. Our first set in the final day of week number 4. The Solar Scarabs going in a very traditional style of composition, seeing something not necessarily new out of Leviathans, but running double magical carry, something that we don't see as much anymore, Mifflin.
No, not nearly as often, but I think both of these drafts have got certain strengths. The deaths break it down very well, but my sole concern for the Solar Scarabs in particular is exactly what Gore had hit on lightly. Sure, Scream could get a roaring start throughout the early. Stu might be able to hold his own in lane, probably won't scale nearly as hard as this Freya. but because you've gone towards Merlin in the mid lane, your capacity to roll with the punches and get ahead is a bit weakened.
Whoa, fire stance burned by Boronic. Might as well eat your words there, Mifflin. But a turnaround kill on Boronic would be huge for Panitom. But it's Scream who's going to turn around and get another. We need one more basic to find the kill. Needs one ability, anything to chase down Panitom. Nice turnaround blink, but a pin even better by Scream. Can't close the distance, does hit level 2. Right at the perfect time. Scream comes up with a second kill for the Scarabs and 3 kills total in just a minute.
Man, sometimes analyst work is touch and go, and that was a go situation. Boronic, of course, getting a whole lot of damage on that Merlin. But Scream leveling up to 2 off the minion wave immediately as you're chasing into Panitom, right in time to get that ferret form, or mink form rather. So important. The Solar Scarabs found their early kills, but with the trade into Boronic, that Merlin not as far ahead as you might like. I'm watching Scream. I'm going to need to see a little bit more.
We'll have to see if the Scarabs can do anything with the momentum that they've now gotten for themselves. Scream specifically level 3 already on this Erlang Shen. Barely a minute and a half in. He's going to try and use that as quick as he can. A pin will force out a Dragonflight from Sheento level 2. Not typically the ability that you want to have to be going for after that root.
Scary D, low HP. Jarcorrr similarly on the retreat. So Soul Lane barely surviving each other's onslaught. And you're right to say that Sheento would have loved to have gotten that first ability for himself, as we do get a look back at how this fight goes down. And it's just simple. Toss out the first ability twice for Boronic. Credit for the first blood. The entire time, Panitom just trying to return his kill. And then the juke back towards lane might be what cost Panitom his life. He wants to get back towards his own tower, but in pathing through the lane, Scream gets in range of a couple minion kills, ticks over to level 2, and from there it's as simple as that. A turnaround yet again. So at the end of the day, 2-1 favoring the Solar Scarabs, but looking at the mid lane, they're both sitting at level 3.
Attempted invade by Ronngyu, but Hand of the God still held on to by Inbound, so that purple buff won't do very much, but Ronngyu still playing very aggressively up on this Horus. It's a pick that we saw Genetics bring out just recently himself, and had a good performance up against the Olympus Bolts. We'll see if Ronngyu can keep that same level of energy going for himself and Zapman in the duo lane. And Fafnir into Freya, definitely not a fun matchup for the Freya, considering all of her damage comes from her auto attacks, and, well, Fafnir's got a nice little disarm thrown into his leap.
He does, but leap forward and all of a sudden you're standing in front of a Freya, which is very quickly becomes something you don't want to do even in the early game. Worth noting though that Zapman, counter to the majority of other Freyas in the league, has still stuck with this Gilded Arrow build. You've got a bit more pressure in the early insofar as kill pressure, your basic attack damage going up a bit, but you are sacrificing a whole lot of your clear potential. Generally, it's Conduit Gem in that slot, really helps you out in the lane.
Yeah, it does give you a lot of that extra boost there. Boronic going for this Doom Orb stun. This is something we've been seeing with a few different mid laners. We'll hold the discussion on that for now because it's a 2v2 in the solo lane. Scary D gets some help from Scream with a double pin. Jarcorrr jumps onto the wave, gets a big heal, level 5 now for both Yark and Panitom. It's a dunk in by Panitom and a double swoop by the back. One more hit is all that's needed, and Jarcorrr finds not just one, but 2 with the Screech.
Man, Jarcorrr just shows why Camazotz is a pick that needs to be reckoned with, especially in his hands. Little known fact about his ultimate, or maybe we'll not get a chance. Stuart, a little bit of trouble. Make it double. 2 people on his heels. Should be able to get out? No, Fafnir's discretion will finish him off. Zapman, credit for the kill, and the Leviathans roaring all the way across the map. But as I was saying about this Camazotz, when you go into Bat Out of Hell, if you hit multiple targets, you get bonus damage, 10% per god. Every single one of his swoops in that 2v2 was hitting 2.
It's going to give you a lot of extra damage out there. I mean, this is one of the reasons why this god was taken away from him during the World Championships. We saw some highlight reel plays coming just from this god alone. So Jarcorrr, a force to be reckoned with on this pick, showing just how potent that he still is, even though this god hasn't really seen the light of day as of much recent. It's kind of been shelved for the majority of Season 9, but Jarcorrr showing he's still got that prowess on it.
Yeah, I think maybe the Camazotz could be a direct answer to Scary D's Raven, right? Because Raven is okay in the laning phase, very survivable, but it's really picked for that late game presence, whereas Camazotz has just a very strong early game. You finish off that first item, generally Transcendence, get it stacked up. You've got decent ability to clear the waves. You can rotate out very easily. It's a much different pace to what we're seeing from the majority of other soul laners. Guardians back in the soul lane. You don't want to see them in the team fight until level 20. And I think Robin finds himself in that similar position. Until you've got your Oni Hunters and your upgraded Sigil, your Spirit Robe, all the mitigation items, this Robin not exactly as effective as a Camazotz.
And even less so effective when it's down a level and a Panitom closing in. But ult is now available for Scary D. Did not have that in the last fight, him or Scream. And unfortunately for them, Jarcorrr and Panitom did hit that level 5 on the wave during the gank. So that gave them the advantage in the team fight just by nature of one more ability each that both hit pretty dang hard.
They do. The Leviathans have got a pretty decent lead already. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the pace stagnate for about 4 or so minutes. Pyromancer probably the easier of the two objectives for them to go towards, especially with the lead Jarcorrr has established for himself in the lane. But what Dave was talking about on the desk with this Osiris build, not necessarily having to go towards Golden Blade, instead Stone Cutting Sword in that first slot, means that the Leviathans, I think, don't really want to slow down the pace. If they can't keep up the action, Panitom should just get out-cleared by Scream and would establish, or at least re-establish parity between these junglers. So I'm keeping my eyes on Panitom. I want to see him getting active. That's what this build is built for. Stone Cutting Sword going to get you a whole lot of value early on.
And going back to what I want to talk a little bit with Boronic is this Doom Orb start. We've seen it a couple of times on some gods. We've seen it with Huang every so often. We've seen it with the Morrigan more often than not, or the Poseidon whenever that gets thrown there. But we don't typically see, well, one, we don't see very much Merlin, but we also don't see much Doom Orb on Merlin. Usually it's things like the Chronos Pendant or the Charon's Coin in that first slot.
I suppose he's just worried about the chase down, right? That additional movement speed from Doom Orb should help you out a bit when Panitom's running you down. Getting a little bit of additional space will help out with Zapman as well once that fight starts off. Additional power in the early 145 infusion from Doom Orb just feels very nice.
Rotation in from the Scarabs off this invade at the purple. Zapman finds a whoop on a Stuart, and Ronngyu will teleport over to his teammate and use that ultimate to get him and Zapman out of the fight. And that will be the end of the engagement for the Solar Scarabs. They cannot continue that chase up.
4-man stack from the Solar Scarabs on the left side, so Sheento able to push a wave into mid. Meanwhile, on the other side, Scary D getting his licks in. Nearly drops Jarcorrr, but Camazotz got to sustain. He's going to Vampiric Bat something, get back to half. Do it again, back to 75%. Scary D's got some sustain, but not nearly as much.
Stun onto Panitom, double taunt by Scream, and into the fire stance, no, the ice stance there, out of Boronic, drops the Blizzard to cut off Panitom's path. The stuns from Inbound are good, and the damage from Boronic is even better. A whoop will catch Scream. Zapman can try to lock him down, doesn't even need the Valkyrie's discretion for the kill. That's Sheento with the fire on the Huang to get another kill for Leviathans, making a 1-for-1 trade.
Inbound might be caught out here, has to detransform, has access to another leap, should be able to create some space. If Ronngyu connects that stun, Zapman could continue moving forward, set up for the whoop, which is probably coming off cooldown very shortly. That was thin margins that Inbound survives by.
Barely able to make it out of there, so supports get out, but unfortunately for the junglers, they both sacrifice their life for a fight over at the red buff. And if we do a roundup, even though the Scarabs got that first blood earlier on, we see Inbound and Ronngyu battling it, at least for the supports, but the gold lead over in favor of the Leviathans, about 1,500 up for themselves. And, well, this is why we've been seeing maybe a little bit more of these very mobile style of supports. Ronngyu able to seal a couple of offerings and get himself right on out.
Laugh spams Inbound while he's there too. Clean play from the Leviathan support, and Zapman rotates through to make sure that Ronngyu does have an escape path. Experience roundup, you've got some leads for the Leviathans. Surprisingly, Sheento actually now a level up on Boronic, a kill, plus being able to farm in that lane for a little bit longer has really helped out this Huang, but Huang being a bit weak in the mid game means that it's not really the biggest deal for the Solar Scarabs. They can keep getting aggressive around that side of the map. Don't have to worry too much about the damage output from Sheento just yet. Soul Gem finished up. That's going to be a pretty nice boon, but outside of that, you're still a couple stacks away from finishing this Warlock staff. I am keeping my eyes on Boronic's build, though. Still just sitting on that Doom Orb. He's got 2,000 gold in hand. He's pretty close to his power spike. Until he gets another 300 or so gold, heads back to base, I don't think the Solar Scarabs really want to fight.
For now, it'll just be a Trebuchet pushed up in mid. Panitom and Scream will battle over the mid Harpies, and the mid and support will battle it out in the midst of the lane. I'm also keeping my eyes on Boronic's health bar, good lord, half HP from one combo out of Sheento. Now keep my eyes on the Soul Lane build as to where Jarcorrr might go with the rest of his. We've seen things like the Glad Shield kind of make its rise back in for the solo lane, is already picked up by Scary D. We've also been seeing Caduceus Shield still kind of make its way up into these more sustain-heavy solo laners.
Yeah, I'm curious. Jarcorrr has gone towards essentially just full assassin builds in the past. I've seen him just really lean into the damage, Transcendence down the Mace tree immediately afterwards, so certainly an option here, especially considering the nature of the damage output of the Solar Scarabs draft. A lot of consistent damage over time. Boronic in the Ice stance, Scream with the auto attack, Scary D in the late game, not exactly a burst god. Maybe highest individual burst is probably Boronic in the Arcane stance. Otherwise, Stu maybe with some crit. So Jarcorrr could have the opportunity to go a little bit more down that damage tree and just utilize the sustain in his kit plus the survivability of Bat Out of Hell to get him out of those situations.
Well, for now it is that will be the Glad Shield for Jarcorrr, so a little bit of Bruiser defenses out there, a little bit of damage towards his name. We've seen how potent this item has been ever since it received its buff a couple of patches ago. And kind of talking about, you know, change-ups and whatnot, we've been seeing so much diversity within the Hunter build. It's a lot of the same items, but we've been seeing different points at where it's being built. We've seen Transcendence into Atalantas. Now we're seeing, at least out of Stuart, Transcendence into the Shuriken Tree. Unless maybe worried about some of the healing, probably imagine that'll be a Wind Demon in that slot.
Yeah, generally if you are foregoing any form of lifesteal in the initial parts of your build, you usually go towards Death Toll for sustain and lane instead. The Cow, Scream turns around, Ronngyu burning quick.
Taunt is good, inbound, will transform. Scream still fighting up against Panitom, but Panitom with that tether will disengage the fight for Scream. Scary D rotates on over, finds the root onto Panitom, needs a little bit more damage, and still has that Mystic Rush, trying to find an opportunity to jump himself on in. Sheento goes up into the sky. It's all of the Scarabs here for this fight, and Ronngyu will be able to dash himself back to the tower. Boronic just shy of being able to pull Ronngyu back in, and the Leviathans make it out.
3-man root from Sheento and great damage output already from this Huang Soul Gem, finding its value early. The Solar Scarabs would have loved to continue the fight, but it seems like Zapman's the one who chooses his engagement.
Taking a 1v3, stunned and cannot get up. Into the Valkyrie's discretion, Stuart able to turn that one around and find the pick on a Zapman.
Just a weird
Questionable?
play. I mean, questionable. That's caster talk. It's a good play if he gets into Valkyrie's discretion pre-bead so he can keep his damage output. I suppose just not really realizing how long that beads was actually lasting. Inbound very quick on the hammer to turn around that fight. If he gets up into Valkyrie's discretion, Stu's just dashing into wall, so that's probably not your kill there, so he has to switch his target. I'm just not sure that I love that call. You don't really need to make that aggressive hero-style play when you're already, as a team, 2,000 gold up.
For now, the Solar Scarabs will clear out the Oracles and get vision on that Gold Fury just to see if the Leviathans do try and make a play over towards there, but really, both of these teams have some good potential of taking down that objective. Zapman with 2 full rings finished up has some decent DPS against there. Boronic on this Merlin, probably one of the better mages in the game to be able to shred through some of those objectives. And can go through them pretty quickly.
He's got 3 rings now.
Oh, he does? Well,
yeah, calm Zapman.
Okay, you know, it's true. He also, yeah.
That's
True.
a Trelly Relly joke.
Yeah.
I got to give him credit. I didn't come up with that. But I do love it. Zapman, 3-time world champion, 3 rings on Freya.
Not a third full one yet. Just has the little small one. Kind of waiting to put his gems on there.
Do you think he buys a 4th ring that it's like foreshadowing?
Could be.
Well, the Leviathans fans would love that.
That's a scary thought for some people to think that Zapman is still on the cusp of potentially being a 4-time champion. It's not, again, that's not just 4 times over the course of, you know, his 10 years of play or whatnot. That's
consecutive.
4 in a row.
Yeah, that would be scary. Zapman looking for the 1v1, and that's exactly what the matchup's going to look like for the most part in the 1v1. Oh, Freya used all of her steroids? I'll hide on a wall in this shadow. And when you're done, I'll come out and maybe we'll fight afterwards. Zapman, not exactly privy to do that, decides to walk himself out, but no dash available this time. Ronngyu on the way in.
Ronngyu will deter Stuart from going any further forward in the lane, so Stuart will just have to wait for his wave to come over towards him. But Rongyu's going to follow it up as far as he can. Inbound, even rotating back over just in case that there was any action over on the left-hand side of the map. Now that the vision is gone from the Gold Fury, maybe, at least for this Leviathans, have an opportunity to try and go for some objective. But with that Pyromancer taken just moments ago, the Leviathans were able to extend that goal lead that they had just earlier on. Now 3,000 gold between these two teams.
Experienced the exact same. The majority of Greater Scorpions going their way. Zapman in a bit of trouble. Valkyrie's discretion channeled. Scream wants more.
Well, beads are not up just yet for Zapman. Does have the shell, but the shell is only going to delay his life bar a little bit longer. The Solar Scarabs, with a 3-man rotation over, will find a pick on the Hunter of the Leviathans.
Man, Zapman is just used to this treatment now. I mean, I was watching his player cam there because that is a guaranteed death once you realize Inbound is just behind that purple buff. Zapman's face didn't change. He didn't change the pacing of chewing his gum. His eyebrows didn't move. Unconcerned, 20 seconds of the grayscale to remain exactly as zen as he has been. Inbound transforms into the dragon. Solar Scarabs showing a bit of positioning around the Gold Fury. It seemed to me that they would have loved to pull it while Zapman was dead, but 15 minutes in, that Gold Fury still is incredibly strong, and any 1 or 2 members of the Leviathans should have been able to stop that push. So once the Scarabs realize 1 or 2 members are nearby, they reset themselves.
I mean, to be fair, Zapman got that treatment yesterday in the match against the Leviathans. I mean, he was the first 2 deaths on his team in lane in just the first few levels of the game. So, yeah, Zapman going down twice in 15 minutes. No stranger for him over there. It's something that the Leviathans, yeah, instead of 2 in, 4 minutes, it's 2 in 15, so at least a good call there. But it's only going to get harder to kill this Freya as it goes on, depending where this 3rd ring ends up for Zapman. We're going to get a lot of extra damage into his kit up against them, and a ton of extra sustain. We've seen kind of a lot of change-ups on to what that 3rd, 4th, or that 4th item, I should say, after the ring is for these gods. Zapman does get his beads, but he's just going to be delaying his life again. Valkyrie's discretion, enough to push Stuart and Inbound back. Thought maybe there would be further chase with Screammmmm on the way.
And no reason to chase it out because Zapman is essentially dead already. Valkyrie's discretion and beads down Shell for an entire minute too. Scream doesn't need to chase now. He can just circle back and try again in just a moment. Zapman gonna have to play very safe in that lane. Solar Scarabs keeping up their presence around the Gold Fury side, even pulling it out. The Leviathans are completely privy to it.
Panitom and Ronngyu here. Ronngyu going up to the skies. Will he crash down immediately on the objective? Yes, he will. Solar Scarabs get the Gold Fury, and the Solar Scarabs will walk themselves out of this fight. No chance for Leviathans to turn this one back towards their favor. So it'll just be one objective to the Order side team. However, Jarcorrr might have something to say about this. A level 17 Camazotz blink for blink. Bats off the mark. Screech does hit, but Jarcorrr just doesn't have the damage to close out the kill.
Good usage of the 3rd ability from Scary D to re-sustain.
Oh,
Zapman,
wow.
I was telling you earlier, he was just dead walking, and is so. Stuart, credit for the kill. Scream did make the rotation all the way back through. Surprised that Jarcorrr doesn't take the 2v1 up against Boronic and Scary D. Still had the bat out of hell. Scary D was moving forward, didn't have the heal anymore. Ultimate also down, but instead resets himself, continues his farm. The Leviathans maintain their lead, but cut now by the Solar Scarabs on a coin toss in the Gold Fury.
Yeah, about 1,000 gold swing that went over towards the Solar Scarabs with that objective. Jarcorrr still being a bully over to Scary D. Scary D just got back to lane moments ago and is now getting some backup with Scream and Inbound, but Panitom is also here to make this a 2v3. Jarcorrr will jump out, still has the Bat of Hell rooted in place. Panitom jumps in and eats a stun instantly, and it might be curtains for both of them unless the rest of the Leviathans can rally around in. A root by Sheento hits Inbound. Panitom will go down, but Inbound should at least be able to trade out his life. No! Scream and Boronic! So much damage coming from those two. They take down 2, and it's Sheento and Ronngyu on the run. Double taunt from Scream. A jump in from Inbound. Ronngyu might not be able to make it out. It's a dunk in from Scary D to find a 3rd one.
Sheento fighting for his life, but Inbound has closed the gap. Float away for a moment, but Stuart has floated in. There's your Aegis. Bought you all of the time that Aegis lasts, and now the Solar Scarabs, 5 strong on the right side of the map. We'll call it 4 strong. Bobby can't stick around for too much longer. Gonna look at the Fire Giant. Zapman on the split push. This one should go down for free.
Inbound gonna at least teeter along with that as much as he can, and now it's Scary D there to be able to soak that one up. It means that the Fire Giant should go to the Solar Scarabs. Boronic was soaking up the damage from the Fire Giant, now sitting along the Ring of Fire at least. We'll throw some abilities from range, but the Fire Giant at the end will go to the Solar Scarabs, so 4 kills and a major neutral objective. Make it 2 once his Pyromancer goes down. Talk about a swing for the Scarabs.
And it's all off the back of Jarcorrr getting a bit too aggressive for my liking. Sure, you're bullying Scary D. You're 3 levels up. Makes sense to me. But are you really even trying to take a tier 2 tower? Best case scenario for right there is Jarcorrr does enough damage to Scary D that he can invade a blue buff. Worst case scenario is that Jarcorrr gets caught out by a 4-man rotation. Panitom comes in, tries to defend you, dies. Jarcorrr dies afterward. And then the entirety of the Leviathans, barring Zapman just by distance, doesn't die. And the worst case is exactly what happens. The Solar Scarabs now 10-5 across the top, 2,000 gold lead for the first time in their favor. And with Fire Giant on 5, you got plenty of towers to look towards to collect some of this gold. No neutral objectives still standing, so the Leviathans, if they want to do anything on the map, will likely be just defending, probably around their tier 2s. Sheento's hit his power point, Obsidian Shard, and Soul Reaver now done. Dueling Dragon's going to be doing a whole lot of damage, but not so much that I think you really want to stack up on a tier 1. It's just not a massive, worthwhile fight. But this pacing from the Solar Scarabs is curious. Stuart on split push makes perfect sense to me. He can join a fight anywhere on the map. But it seems as if the Solar Scarabs are kind of just walking around the jungle, hoping they ping a ward for the Leviathans. Because what we saw was Scarabs walk on the right side, the entirety of the Leviathans start to move over towards the right, and then the Solar Scarabs slowly waft their way towards the left side of the map, and the Leviathans are getting led by the nose.
Now the Scarabs put their focus to the left tier 2. Zapman got hit by that pin. And Inbound losing about half his health on this tower siege. Stuart needs one more good auto to take it down, but he just can't find it. Root and a fire on Inbound will put him low, but he might be too low to continue to push on the left side of the map at the least. Leviathans slow down the Scarabs from continuing a push towards maybe that Phoenix, and maybe even delayed them from going towards this mid or right lane for now.
Hey, it's all about towers with the first rotation of Fire Giant, especially if you get it this early into the game. You want the gold lead. That's all this Fire Giant's for. You're not looking to end. Not anymore. TTK changes, how the towers interact, the Phoenix damage as well, makes it so difficult to have these super early ends, especially against the reigning world champions. So picking up a tier 1 and a tier 2 and maintaining a minute and 30 on your power play should allow you to do the same thing somewhere else on the map. So I like that play from the Solar Scarabs. Group up, take your towers, head back to base, spend the gold, and try and do it again.
Root onto Ronngyu, but Ronngyu does have that heal to get himself back towards Sheento. Screaming Scary D walking through the jungle to spot anybody out, but once the minion wave shows up, they might not even need it. Again, Stuart split pushing, this time on the right side of the map, while the rest of his team works towards the mid. 2 more towers taken away and only 2 more left standing. Seems they might just leave Stuart to split push on his own on the right side. Zapman has been sent over there to deal with him. You can see Inbound now rotating over to make sure that Stuart can push this tower down for free. Zapman finds the whoop on Inbound. It should be a retreat from the support, but how far can he run? Far enough, thanks to the help of that sprint root coming out.
Yeah, jumping over the wall, a bit dangerous. Zapman very nearly able to turn that kill around. Draconic Transformation was there, so Inbound had another layer of safety. 2 more tier 1 towers taken down, and the Leviathans are sick of it. They're engaging.
Sheento does throw out the fire, doesn't quite hit the target he was looking for. Jarcorrr does get pulled back in, but not a whole lot of damage done towards him. He'll be able to sustain most of that up. Inbound transforms on the left side of the jungle, and for the Solar Scarabs, they've given up on the towers for now. They'll use the last of their Fire Giant to melt away the Primal Fury, and this gold lead is now sponged up to about a 6,000 lead for the Solar Scarabs, 6,500. The experience mattering a lot less at this stage of the game, but I mean, talk about a swing. They were down 2,000-3,000 gold just earlier on, and with this one Fire Giant, they've made this an 8, nearly 9K swing in their favor.
Yeah, triple the gold lead they had off the Fire Giant pull. So the Solar Scarabs in a much better position to actually look towards the Fire Giant on respawn, about 40 seconds, until we get to see that team fight. I'm keeping my eyes on the front line of both of these teams. Jarcorrr and Panitom so integral to the Leviathans to create space for Zapman and Sheento. Ronngyu probably going to be, for the most part, playing that peel role in the back line. Similarly, on the other side, the Solar Scarabs, Scream and Scary D really have their work cut out for them because the dive potential of the Leviathans is incredibly strong. Jarcorrr, with Bat Out of Hell, should be able to close that gap. But with Blink down for an entire minute, Teleport down as well, Jarcorr's only got the 1 life to play with. Whereas, on the other side, Scary D might not have upgraded his teleport just yet, but if he's sent back to base, you gotta think he should be able to afford it.
Yeah, as long as he's got the golden pocket. And right as the Fire Giant respawns, the Solar Scarabs are already in position to try and deal with that one. Inbound does get his transformation through, but won't actually go to the Fire Giant. Sends a taunt onto Ronngyu, gets his ultimate out right away, but Ronngyu barely makes it out. Just in time, about 10% of his health left by the time that he lands on the tail end of the ultimate. But that sets up all the space in the world. The Fire Giant is just gone. The DPS out of the Solar Scarabs melts it through. Scary D finds a triple ult in the backline. Zapman forced up into the sky, but how far can he go with everybody hot on his heels and Stuart to find the pick?
Zapman's got to be thinking to himself, what hit me? And it was Scary D like a truck. The Solar Scarabs with 5 strong on the Fire Giant yet again could continue this work they had started earlier. Tier 2 on the right already weakened. Will go down. The Leviathans haven't got much left. Jarcorrr, no ultimate. Ronngyu, no ultimate. No Zapman for 40 seconds. The Scarabs want the Phoenix.
Scary D blinks into the backline, eats a bit of CC, and will use the overhead kick to get out, but the target for the Scarabs was this right side bird. That one goes down swiftly to the damage output of Stuart and Screammmmm. Boronic rotating over with the rest of the squad. The Scarabs, after taking that right Phoenix, will go ahead and grab the middle tower, the last one of those standing structures. And now it will only be left for the last 2 Phoenixes, but for now the Solar Scarab's not going to go for it. Instead, that Pyromancer is up. It could be a nice prize for them on their way out.
You know, I was wondering, why is Scary D doing so much damage? He forewent Lono's mask. He just doesn't pick up the mask for himself. Still has a whole lot of mitigations as well as inside the ultimate. So he is certainly tanky, maybe not as tanky as he could be, 15% less tanky, but his damage output was enough that Zapman had to go up in the air. He's creating space for his team by dealing damage, and he does just enough that the Leviathans need to be concerned about it. I like this Robin build a whole lot, and the only difference is that he doesn't pick up Lonos. Otherwise, that's exactly what SOT was going for.
Yeah, the only difference being that Bulwark of Hope that gets picked up, so an extra shield to throw on top of the shields that Robin was already stacking onto his HP bar thanks to the help of that passive. But once we actually get to one of these 5v5s under the bird, we didn't get a chance to look at it there because, well, Zapman was gone, but even with Zapman there, and probably not going to be here for this one, ultimate is available, but Zapman doesn't like to use it. He's boxing against Scary D, and he's not really going up anymore in HP. He'll go up into the sky, but then right back down into the dirt. As soon as he lands, it'll be Scary D to put him there.
Zapman was fighting for his life just to break the HP shield. Ronngyu trying to create some space. Panitom in.
The crits are good. Panitom will ult over the wall to get back out. And, well, I was going to ask you how 5v5 defense can look for the Leviathans, but we're barely even going to get to see a 2v5, a 4v5 even at that. With such low health bars on the Leviathans, they cannot defend this mid-Phoenix. Another one goes down to the Scarabs. And it's something Scary D was talking about. You know, he's talking about we're a momentum-based team. If we can find some wins under our belt, that doesn't seem to just apply to only finding a game win. They found one team fight on the right side, Mifflin, and ever since then, the Scarabs have been in complete control.
Massive team fight, though. I mean, a 4-man wipe.
Oh, yeah.
Fire Giant so early. Left side, Phoenix going down quick at the Leviathans. They seem like they're scared to walk up, and I can't blame them.
Ronngyu will eat a hammer from Inbound, and the rest of the Scarabs will now walk away. A minute left on their Fire Giant power play, and the final prize for them will at least be this Primal Fury once it spawns back in. Unless one of the Leviathans decide to try and step up to stop this one. That should go over to the Solar Scarabs handedly. A 12,000 gold lead from a 2K deficit is not a great place for the Leviathans to be in. But the Leviathans are pushing up towards this Fury. I'm not sure this is the full commit that the Leviathans want to take. And they won't do so. As soon as the Fury goes down and they see all the Scarabs are out, the Leviathans retreat.
Leviathans probably thinking to themselves, only way we get to fight with Zapman is if we fight right now while he's behind us. So maybe one of the best fights they could have taken, because I haven't seen a 5-on-5 in the last 28 or so minutes. Even the last impactful team fight, which is the one we were talking about a moment ago on the right side of the map, was also sans Zapman. He was on the left side. I haven't seen the Leviathans 5-on-5. I couldn't tell you what it looks like. 30 minutes in, the Leviathans, a team renowned for their team fight, haven't done it.
Haven't really been given an opportunity to, whether it be because
I don't know about that.
Well, they've been given some opportunities.
17 kills? There have been some opportunities.
There's been some, but Zapman's been picked off the last 2 major opportunities they could have had against it. You know, fight over on the right-hand side, maybe defend that right Phoenix. Zapman gets caught out inside the jungle trying to make a retreat, and then Zapman gets caught out in his own jungle. Again, you know, not a place that you would expect somebody to go down, is right by their own obelisk that late into the game, but Zapman goes down. It forces another 4v5 at the mid Phoenix and the left Phoenix. Maybe now we'll get to see what the 5v5 looks like from the Scarabs. His Ronngyu goes in,
Wow.
Scream finds a double taunt, but Scream's health bar is not looking so great. Zapman up in the sky because his health is bad. Boronic will use the Aegis and gets a backup from the team. Panitom the first one out. Jarcorrr up in the sky trying to close out one of these kills. Boronic is so low, but the fire is burning back through. It's a turnaround. Boronic finds one, Stuart finds another, and it's only Sheento left alive, and Scary D will not let him go freely. The Solar Scarabs have taken down 4. They have found game number 1 up against the reigning world champions. And what a convincing way to do so with a deicide to close it out.
Momentum, momentum, momentum for the Solar Scarabs. One team fight is all it took for them to find the win. 30 minutes in the working, 17-6, and a clean engagement at that. Not often that Scream's able to go for a double taunt, one on a Freya in the late game, and just survive and walk away. Zapman did not have enough damage output. Maybe had he finished the build, we would have seen exactly that. Scream paying the iron price for taunting a late game Freya. But maybe even 30 minutes in, can we call it late game? She didn't finish the build.
Wasn't fully finished out there, and Boronic put out an insane amount of damage that last time. He lived on, what, a quarter HP for so long throughout there. The lifesteal that he had built into his abilities and his kit and whatnot, able to keep him alive through there. The fire just absolutely melting through the health bars of the tank in that late game team fight. Stuart, the crit damage, even with 3 spectral armors built out there, that was not enough to stop the DPS out of Stuart.
Yeah, the DPS on objective was equally strong. Once the Solar Scarabs had their lead, it was Pyromancers, Gold Furies, Towers, just clean objective play all the way across the map. That was the only team fight we got to see from the Leviathans. Didn't go so great. I'm sure we're in for some adaptations going to game 2.
Solar Scarabs find game number 1. It's at least one of the 2 that they need to get this set. Can they close this one out? We'll find out right after this break.
Hey, wait, what did it win?
You win the respect.
You're telling me an alien wore this?
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, that was a good cut.
Messaging him to mute.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course, and I can probably watch a stream on the side.
Content's gonna look good.
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah. She got that vibe, she got that go-go. Ooh. She mesmerized with her eyes when she's so close. Yeah. You gon' see when you get to know me. I'll be right beside you when you're lonely. How you be swinging with that body, put it on me. Woo. Won't you be the body in my story? She said, what you want from me? Baby, what you want from me? Yeah, yeah. Nothing but your company. Sitting on the top with me. Yeah, yeah. She said, what you want from me? Baby, what you want from me? Yeah, yeah. Nothing but your company. Sitting on the top with me. Yeah, yeah. Oh, girl, I can give you the time of your life right now, right now. Give you the moment you never could have right now, right now. Let me in, let me in, let me in your world. Yeah, let me in, let me in, let me in your life. Yeah. Yeah. Girl, I can give you the time of your life right now, right now. Give you the moment you never could have right now, right now. Let me in, let me in, let me in your world. Yeah, let me in, let me in, let me in your life. Yeah.
I'm back in my bag, yo. Conscious. ISO. Diamond. Back in my bag and I ain't gotta brag, I do this shit for real. When we was down and we had nothing, we had to share a meal. We put the shit in overdrive with no steering wheel. Shorty throw that thing back in a pair of heels. Yeah, she be riding on that thing like a Ferris wheel. Yeah, I love them dark skin, brown skin, caramel. You know I had to bring it to the hood like she Karen Civil when she keep on turning head. Cause when she walk that thing jiggle, jiggle.
And we going back to back on them like we Huey and we Riley. This that back in my back flow, we back again so highly. This that back in my back flow, we back to change the climate. This that back in my back flow, we bring the force like Tommy. Back in my back flow. Back in my, back in my bag, yeah. I'm back in my, I'm back in my bag, yeah. I'm back in my, this my, back in my bag flow.
Back again, yeah, we keep on stacking it, what's happening? Everything been Gucci, got me feeling like I'm dapper then. Life has been a movie, yeah, so shout out to the cameraman. Pull up to the scene, it's going down like an avalanche.
Steady going up like a travel plan. Homer Simpson face, lucky power plan. Yeah, I'm off that dope, like I'm back again to Vizzy. At the Mellies, out on Club Hurst. Give the word if it's a city, Lord forgive me. Still having motion, dog, so why would I slow it? Make it rain on them, bust a band, then you throw it. We was steady having it, even at our lowest. High speed road runner, keep my motor going.
Hey, hey, people feel away, but they don't show it. Gotta watch the people that's around you, that you grow it. They be coming around you with some plans to steal your moment. Soon as I she be like, baby, where you going? Never slowing down, it's enough to go around. Yeah, you probably knew it's then, but really you don't know it's now. Blood is show and tell, but all my know me well. It was either chase a dream or go to jail, but none of us ain't
and we
going
going back to back on them like we Huey and we Riley. This that back in my back flow, we back again so highly. This that back in my back flow, we back to change the climate. This that back in my back flow, we bring the force like Tommy. Back in my back flow. Back in my, back in my bag, yeah. I'm back in my, I'm back in my bag, yeah. I'm back in my, this my, back in my bag flow,
Yeah, not for real. Double live. Do or die, you already know. Don't try. This at home, cause none of y'all really.
Ay, coming in, flex, I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2, 2, 3, 3, I'm on 10 again, state your name, been dope on flame, I just switched the lanes, damn he did it again, I just flipped the pain, stripping and dipping in bass, slab on everything, swimming you sinking away.
And it's the Solar Scarabs who strike first in this best of 3 set to start off our SPL Sunday. Solar Scarabs against the Leviathans. Solar Scarabs up 1-0 here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League, powered by our friends over at Alienware. And if you at home want to be powered by Alienware, you can be. Just head on over to SMITEGame.com/Alienware and use code AWSMITE09 for discounts on select Alienware gear. Play on the same stuff that we're working on here on the desk and what the pros are playing on in the back and what production is productioning on back in the back room as well. So thanks again to Alienware for being in with us here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. Gormizer, you have some thoughts on Alienware, though.
Well, it's just these laptops are deceptively powerful. I don't know what happened, but like I had a laptop that was like, I want to say like well, not a size and a half, like 3 inches wider and thicker.
Yeah.
And it is just intrinsically worse than these
just
things.
much worse.
Like, this is just a better machine, and like some of them are better than my desktop at home.
Yeah, if my like college
I need an
laptop was
upgrade.
on the desk here, it would sound like we were working in an airport, like the
Yeah, oh,
runway.
yours did that too?
And these are nice
I
and
hate
these are nice
those.
and quiet, nice and powerful. Anyway, thanks for Alienware for being with us here in Season 9. Gora, let's talk about game number 1 though. Solar Scarabs able to take down the Atlantis Leviathans, and it's a lot of what Scary D was talking about in that pregame interview. The early game for this team is where they built their lead. And actually, as far as the current meta, a relatively quick game for this Solar Scarabs team. They're able to make clean work of the Atlantis Leviathans.
And what I think is impressive from them, again, was a lot of plays. You notice this is 18.5 minutes in, a little bit of a gold lead for the Leviathans. Nothing massive at this point, but a very, very deep dive from Jarcorrr leads to kills onto Panitom, then leads to kills onto Jarcorrr. And then you've just got a numbers advantage. It was right after this fight they get that first Fire Giant as well. And so, the first one, I think, is a balanced, 18.5 minute game going back and forth. You can tell the Leviathans have a little bit of a lead in farm, but that's about it that they've got going for them. And I'm not saying this to take anything away from the Scarabs. They played that fight beautifully, but there was no reason for the Leviathans to be extended where they were. The positioning they were in didn't really make a lot of sense. And so the Scarabs take a fight that is set up for them. They read it well, they play it well, they get the kills, they get the FG, and then from that moment forward, they played maybe some of the best late game that I've seen from the Scarabs this year, right? I mean, very clean, very concise. They're getting good damage and a lot of good setup to the point where, Mifflin had even said it. There wasn't a lot of damage coming down out of Zap. He's 1-6-1. So that Freya got shut down pretty well throughout all of that. Only 9,000 damage from a Freya at this point, at any point in a game, is very low. And when Scream is going to the backline and taunting you, and you're only getting 9k damage, yeah, that jungler's going to have a field day, right? So I think that there was a lot going on there on both sides. The Scarabs play really well, and you're lacking a little bit of, some positional awareness there for the Leviathans for that first fight, damage from your carry, whereas Stuart was knocking it out of the park the entire time. So I think that was just a fun win to watch from the Scarabs.
Yeah, and look, a bad game from Panitom. Didn't see much from the Osiris. Low damage numbers there as well. It's a full team. It's a full good team game from the Solar Scarabs. And honestly, it felt like a pretty full bad team game from the Atlantis Leviathans. Later on in the game, the Huang for Sheento was doing damage, yes, but on the back foot, your base is being sieged, you're going to find poke damage. I think it's a regroup style of game 2 for the Leviathans now, and just more of the same for the Solar Scarabs.
Yeah.
And you could be looking not only at a win, but a 2-0 win, something that's unheard of for the Solar Scarab squad.
I was actually looking at it. So, they've not had, a lot of 2-0s. And Mifflin had mentioned it, because I was trying to find, is there a correlation of Scarabs, wins to game 1 or wins in game 2 and winning sets? And the answer to that is just a resounding no. In fact, they've actually lost more sets when they've won the first game than they've won. I think the Valks were the only one where they won the first game and then still ended up winning all of that.
You're saying the odds are even further against them now?
But you've got an advantage, right? Because now you're up 1-0, so you
but
go
history.
into this. But yeah, history doesn't treat them very well here. I will say, though, that's the same case. It's the same amount of how many games. They typically win their game 2s in their sets, though. Winning game 1, maybe that doesn't line up as much, but if you look at their history, game 2 is usually their strong suit. So having the one game advantage, I want to lean a little more into them and say that they're going to have some success here. But I do think that the Leviathans have approached this really well. That Freya ban, Stuart specifically has a really good Freya. And I think that helps get it off the table so that they don't have to deal with it, right? It's a Zap, you just did 9,000 damage, and Stuart's nuts. Let's get rid of this pick.
Yep.
I think getting rid of the Erlang is going to be a nice limit. The Bastet as well, a limiter there on to Scream. Prior to this, at least this phase, there was a lot of Mercury, a lot of gods that I would say were right in Scream's wheelhouse. I still think Kali has a place where you could slot her in pretty well, but I think that it won't be surprising if they shift Scream onto something else. I also don't think it's going to be surprising when Scream is still really good at that pick. So it is something that is just maybe a little bump in the road for the Scarabs, but not anything massive.
Yeah, Olorun would be a good lock-in for the Scarabs, as you talk about. 67% win rate across 6 games. So was that 4 out of 6? That's how the math checks out. I think you round up to 67% with the Osiris in there as well. So didn't get to see much, if anything at all, from Osiris in game number 1. If this ends up being Osiris for Scream, you would hope, if you're the Solar Scarabs or one of their fans, that you do get to see a bit more pressure out of this pick. The Olorun, though, Gore, is something that Stuart has defended the early game of pretty heavily. We talked about Freya and how her early game isn't maybe quite as bad. It's not the best in the game by any means, but not as bad as it used to be. I think Olorun can be in that conversation as well. Sanctified Field, level 5, big power spike there. So can the Leviathans find pressure, though, to draft into this Olorun ends up being the question. And also, you're revealing the Sanctified Field early, which potentially opens up, Gore, the opportunity for counterplay around the ultimate. Morrigan, Fafnir ends up being a pretty solid pick here, but you're opening up wider variety of draft picks around the Sanctified Field later in the draft by picking it so early. I wonder if that's something the Leviathans can capitalize on.
Yeah, honestly, I'm really interested in the fact that they don't go into anything as heavy. I mean, Cthulhu's not been banned heavily, and we've been seeing them on the rise.
I thought it might have been a Morrigan
Cthulhu. Yeah, and in my eyes, that honestly might have worked out better, because then you have 2 Cthulhus that are going to chase him down. I see the Fafnir. I mean, we just saw the Camazotz, and again, late game, like early on, he had, 3 levels, I think Mifflin had called out at one point. A lot that was going well for Jarcorrr in that lane. And that's a good ultimate to try and chase down an Olorun through his Sanctified Fields. Cthulhu is one that we typically see through there. Vamana's been on the rise lately. He's CC immune when you go big baby, so you can chase him down. So yeah, there's plenty of options to go for. How much of them I love right now, or well, maybe not even love is the right way to go for it. It's just how many of them do I think are going to make it through the ban phase? Granted, I listed 3, only 2 can get banned, but I feel like you're more likely to throw out like Camazotz and Cthulhu, ban out Jarcorrr, and then you are to maybe let that come through. But then again, we also haven't seen Jarcorrr go for picks that I kind of expected. I mean, with Artio on the rise, you would have thought that, or at least I would have thought, that that's something they would have gone back to, especially with their success on it yesterday.
So AMC tends to be a Boronic pick, and a good Boronic pick at that. Really just a good pick here in the SPL in general. The last time we saw AMC for Boronic was the Game 2 win over the Tartarus Titans a few weeks ago, 6-3 and 13. And actually, Boronic has played 5 different picks since then. Boronic has been pretty flexible over in mid. How concerned are you, though, Gore, about outside of Sanctified Field, which is kind of unfair to ignore, so maybe including Sanctified Field. Olorun and AMC is your backline. Do you feel like that's susceptible to dive? I mean, somewhat immobile in the AMC, outside of Sanctified Field, somewhat immobile for the Olorun. Of course, you can use that defensively. Do you think there's opportunities here for the Leviathans to make life uncomfortable for both of the carries?
Yes, but I also think they have the capability. So their defense isn't that great, right? They're, like you said, not very mobile. You're going to get caught out. If Sanctified Fields is down, it might be one of the easiest dives on the back line you have.
We saw this coming.
But if I'm AMC and I have an Olorun beside me and an Osiris, I hit a stinger on one person trying to dive me, that guy's getting shredded so quickly he doesn't know. Like, I think the Scarabs have a good potential 4 kills here, but they are going into, I mean, a little bit of what we called, right?
I think the Leviathans covered their bases very well here. I mean, the Solar Scarabs have to know a Cthulhu pick is around the corner. They not only choose to ban out Panitom instead of anything from Jarcorrr, but Cthulhu just feels like the obvious choice with a Morrigan already on your team. But I also think the Leviathans then cover their bases well by picking up this Nemesis, the Retribution, one of the great counters to Cthulhu. Stinger plus Retribution, and that, use one-on-one Cthulhu, use the other one on the other, and suddenly your team fight isn't feeling that bad. Kali, though, Gore, synergizes with the kin size pretty well, so there is still Shred. You're gonna have 2 Cthulhus running through a Sanctified Field, yes. But there is still Shred between a Stinger, between a late game Olorun, between a Kali with kin size.
It's the one thing you highlight, though, right?
Right.
It's the 2 Cthulhu. If it was just the one, I have a Stinger and a Kali, that guy's dead. There's a second one that's always going to join the fight. I think that a late game Kali with a Stinger applied to it, again, with Olorun's damage, you're going to burn through a tank, no problem. But then knowing that Morrigan is more than likely choosing it as a transformation, even if not, even if you only have the one to help burn down a Sanctified Fields or run through a Sanctified Fields, and then Morrigan's transforming into like an Osiris or anything else that's on the table, you still have so much, I think, capability here for the Leviathans, and a lot of good damage that's very single target on the Scarabs. So I think that if the Leviathans do something similar, I mean, the way they played last game, I still think that this Scarabs draft can burn through them, because a lot of those fights that the Scarabs won were taking down one, then the next, then the next. And that's what got them their lead. It's got them the first Fire Giant. So there's a lot of opportunity for them here to potentially try and recreate that. But it's going to be harder, right? You've got a tankier target instead of the Camazotz. It's going to be, I think, a much more convincing performance. This Nemesis, I think, will maybe perform just stronger overall than what we got to see out of that Osiris, which is not necessarily a high bar to set, as well as the fact that Zapman, presumably on the Chernobog, but might be the Morrigan, right? Depending on how they want to flip this up. Either way, he's got to do more than 9,000 damage, right? Like, I mean, there's literally, I think he could accidentally
I don't know, Gore,
do more damage.
There's 8,999
damage below
ways
the 9K
that he could do less than 9K. No, I don't expect a repeat 9,000 damage game performance from Zapman. Sylvanus always stands out to me. Only seen a few games of it in this phase of the SPL.
Inbound has a nuts Sylvanus.
Feels like it tends to be inbound. Do you think it gets an inbound boost? Do you think it's a style of pick that in inbound's hands, you expect a bit more from it?
Yeah, I think like Inbound is really good at this god. He typically hits a lot of his pulls, is going to get a lot of good roots. Usually the ults are on point, whether it's for peel or setup. So I tend to expect a little more when I see the Scarabs lock this in because I know what it has. And when you've got an AMC, you've got an Olorun, you've got an Osiris, you've got a Call, like there's a lot of people that are going to be able to follow up on a really sick pull. And you're looking at it, you know, Chernobog has a dash, so if you hear the cue, you can get out of there pretty quickly. But Morrigan, Fafnir, like there's a lot more easier targets to grab.
Well, Gorr, can the Solar Scarabs fend off another Game 3, or will the Atlantis Leviathans take us there? We'll go into game number 2 to find out.
Thank you so much, Dave and Gorr. And Mifflin, I'm going to echo some of the concerns of the desk. And, you know, Dave was kind of predicting it. You see an Olorun pop up, and some of the hard counters to dealing with that sanctified field is the Cthulhu. The second wave of bans go through, Cthulhu not taken away, then Cthulhu also not picked by the Scarabs. And now you've got to deal with two of them. Mifflin, I'm real concerned about the Solar Scarabs if the Leviathans can meet them at an even pace in late game.
Yeah, but getting to that even pace of late game, gonna be pretty hard, especially because they talked about it glibly on the desk, but it happened. Zapman is playing the Morrigan. Here's the thing about the Morrigan. Weak early game, doesn't have the best survivability until you tick over to level 5, hoping that you've got a decent transformation for survivability. So I'm looking at it. Who are you turning into exactly at 5? Not the best transformation targets. Maybe Osiris, I suppose, but because it's not Osiris jungle, you're just really getting the defense. So, with that said, we could be looking at a similar situation to game 1, where Zapman is getting the Zapman treatment, and it would be easier this time around because it's a Morrigan. Dot damage from inbound means that Zapman's stealth will never work as long as those wisps are being applied aggressively. Dot damage from Scream means that stealth will never work, and Scream's just going to be using Lash every single time. Bees as well from Boronic. There are some tools for the Solar Scarabs to put the pressure onto the Leviathans early. But I want to hear this from you, J-Mac. This is a special request from me to you.
Okay, I'm listening.
When Zapman ticks over 9,000 damage, I want your best, like, Nappa or Vegeta, whoever said it. I don't remember, but I want to hear it.
It was Vegeta.
Nappa.
No, Vegeta said it. Because he's the one who took the scanner off and yelled it's over 9,000 and broke it in his hand.
And that's what I want to hear.
Okay, we got there. Stuart's also got a dot to deal with it too. It completely looked over the fact that he's got a mannequin scepter instead of the gilded arrow.
Plus a dot
or even that. Also, yeah, just being the nature of this Olorun. So we'll keep our eyes on the dual lane. And I think you're right to bring up the fact that Morrigan, you know, going to be a little bit of time. Zapman, it wasn't until, what, like 20 or so minutes till he's joining those team fights. And typically we do see this Morrigan over in the mid lane so she can get active as early as possible. So it might be a little bit of time. At least for now, the Solar Scarabs will keep up that pressure in the dual lane. Inbound, actually, going for something a little bit different. We haven't seen this helmet start in some time.
Yeah, a little bit of defense, some power as well. Probably going to be the Lotus pickup. Zapman pulled in a little bit of trouble. Has to put respect in the damage output of Stuart. That second ability from Olorun just does so much, as well as the Mannequin Scepter early. So losing out in your beads, not a great start for the Z-Man.
And it's definitely not going to be great if now that Scream knows that Zapman is lacking out on that set of safety, but doesn't have a whole lot of time to make a rotation over there. Give or take about another minute and a half to 2 before Scream will lose out on some of that window. Those transformations to be available. Zapman can go right into this Cthulhu if he just wants some extra defense. Scary D if he wants an immediate ultimate to jump himself on out, or even just some death immunity of his own by turning into Scream.
Yeah, but turning into Jarcorrr in particular throughout the early game, because of how Changeling works, you maintain your ability level order. He's probably maxing Dark Omen right now. That's the second ability. Do you really want an empowered Mire early on for self-heal? I mean, sure, I guess, if you're just worried about the ult.
Inbound with another max range pull, and now Zapman is in danger. The show keeps him alive for a little while longer, but Stuart is blasting more damage through that. Mannequins will pop the stealth right away, but Stuart doesn't have the damage to close that one out. Throws out a couple of orbs, but not going to have enough to take out Zap.
Good peel from Ronngyu. Blocks so many of those auto attacks. Shell placed very well to keep Zapman alive. the Solar Scarabs, specifically Inbound, just deserves a whole lot of credit. It is not easy to land those pulls.
No.
It's certainly not easy to do it 3 times in a row.
Panitom takes a lot of damage from the bees, almost goes down to damage through, but the honey should be it. Boronic, once again, coming up for first blood with the Solar Scarabs. And maybe another one over here on the left side. Zapman, a little bit off the mark there from Inbound to try and find that pull. Not sure if he was aiming for Zap or Ronngyu in that case, but at the end of the day, Solar Scarabs get their first blood.
Oh, he wanted Zapman 100%. He couldn't see Zapman, John Cena style, so he just throws it in the middle of the wave, or tower rather, just praying that it connects. And had it done so, Zapman would have died. Stuart nearby, had the knock-up ready, damage output ready, 2 was already charged up, so could have been Zapman. Barely survives that exchange. Loving what I'm seeing from the Solar Scarabs, man. They are just getting active all the way across the map. We gotta look back at exactly how this goes down.
Yeah, Boronic sitting pretty far back. I gotta imagine just Panitom stepping a little bit too far. No, it's actually a blink initiation by Scream. The stinger after. Shield is good for a little bit of reflect damage, but an easy cleanup right after by Boronic. Clean kill for the Solar Scarabs.
Yeah, you were right. He did step up a little too far. Immediately slammed by that stinger. That's what happens when you're going towards blink in the first slot. Had Panitom had beads, he probably just beads the cripple from Boronic and dashes towards his own allies, but because he has to path away from the wave, really puts him out of position. Had the Hive not already been set up by Boronic, I think he only had enough mana there for 1 ability. Spawning the Hive would have cost him, and you needed that movement speed. You can't really trigger the honey without it, especially if you only have 1 ability available. So just clean setup from Boronic, and unfortunate circumstances for Panitom net the Solar Scarabs first blood, and a pretty significant lead 5 minutes in.
Yeah, about 700 or so gold, so a little bit more, at least than the first blood bounty's worth. But I think it's pressure more than anything that the Solar Scarabs want. Still riding that momentum from game number 1, finding that one team fight on the right side of the map. They got them a 4-kill swing from that point on. It was essentially game over for the Scarabs, or for game over for the Leviathans, and Scarabs able to take that own up there. I completely lost track of where I was going on.
Did you say it's game over for the Levi's?
No, that was last game.
Oh, okay.
That was last game. Talk about last game.
No, not right now.
No,
what have you seen?
No, it's game over, man. 1 kill up, that's it. That's GG. First kill of the game wins.
Well, I mean, the Solar Scarabs 100% win rate when they find game 1 win, so maybe that's what you're talking about as well.
No, they aren't, actually. They've lost their game 1s. That was something that Gormeister brought up.
Oh, what?
He looked that up.
Well, I was eating barbecue in the back. Production told me that the stat was right. Literally, our head of production was like, yeah, that's what they said. Guess not.
Scary D in danger. Cthulhu ultimate from Jarcorrr should be enough to clean up the kill. Needs 1 more hit, and the AoE will do so. Leviathan's on the board, but Scream wants to chop in, but unfortunately for him, that disarm from Ronngyu will stop Scream in his tracks.
So the Solar Scarabs now on the retreat. Leviathan's heavy presence on the right-hand side. Scream has to be careful about stepping forward. Jarcorrr has Deceptive Burst. It is an Osiris transformation for Zapman. Not how you generally want to use it, just for the escape.
Yeah, just uses that ultimate to get out of danger. Inbound still sticking around. That's it. More pulls than he's missed, at least from what we've seen. 3 for 4 on just the ones that have been caught on cam at the very least. Inbound goes for that one and ends up making it 3 for 5 out of that one, so dropping his pull percentage. But still, pressure nonetheless in the duo lane. The Scarabs have been essentially at this tower line the entirety of this laning phase.
But Inbound has soaked up so much farm from Stuart. The only way to offset that is by doing this. You need to invade these camps. Easier said than done with a Levi's on your heels.
Inbound has ultimate, will hold on to it. Sanctified Field is good. Sheento dives in with his ult, but that ult from Inbound finally goes through. A root onto Ronngyu, but the stun is even better to lock him in. Sheento finds the 2nd kill for the Levi's.
Inbound kind of got owned by Sanctified Fields there, just didn't really have the timing on Rongyu's leap. Had he knocked up Ronngyu as well, probably survives there, or maybe even return kill potential for the Solar Scarabs, but a bit too early, and it cost them.
Well, Scream is here. Zapman does have beads. We'll use it on that. The lash damage is good, but Ronngyu once again shows up, finds another disarm on Scream, and another disengage by the Scarabs on the left side.
The Scarabs continue their efforts at striking at Zapman, but still coming up empty. Zapman also just benefiting from not splitting as much farm, has maintained level parity with Stuart, finishes up the Doom Orb, and picks up a Chalice of Healing. I guess if you're worried about the poke and all the sustain that Stuart's got just by being Olorun, that's one way to stick around in this lane. Not something I'm used to seeing, though, from that side of the map.
No, I'm trying to remember. There was an SPL set not too long ago where there were like 3 or 4 Chalice of Healings picked up, which is unheard of. I mean, you see it in the solo lane very commonly. I think we saw it in support alongside a chalice, an Oracle chalice that Inbound has picked. It might have been the Solar Scarabs. Now I think I'm talking myself into thinking that it was the Solar Scarabs who picked up multiple of those, because we see Scream has picked up one in the jungle. So yeah, I think it was the Scarabs who did it before.
Hey, they're all about the long con, and they're going for economical decisions. Won't have to buy any more health potions. Scary D might wish he had a couple. Drop down to about a quarter HP, but Scream nearby just tries to sneak away the Totem of Coup. I don't think you're going to be able too successful in doing that. Scary D can't show any presence. The Leviathans rotate their way in.
I'm wondering what Inbound is going to go for that next item. Did go for the Lotus Crown, so has the helmet.
It's got a Heart Ward, right?
I mean, fighting against 3 magical, Heart Ward would make sense. But again, this is the Solar Scarabs. This is Inbound. They always do some weird stuff. You never know what will come from them. But yeah, I got to agree with you. I imagine it's got to be Heart Ward.
You just want that aura for your team. Good infusion of just stat line, a little bit of HP helps out a fair bit. You're not really sacrificing too much. You've already got the Lotus Crown in the first slot. Wisp giving you protections. Lotus Crown giving you protections as well as healing over to yourself and allies. So valuable. So Inbound, I think, is essentially got carte blanche from here. The early portions of the game should be just, I suppose, plug and play. Simple builds for the Sylvanus.
We do see Stuart just now take over to that level 10 again because of how much Inbound has stuck to this left side of the map, still over here. Setting up for maybe trying to go for an invade on Zap, but I think he spotted that Ronngyu was walking across a ward earlier on. So Zapman maybe now even just slightly ahead of Stuart as far as the XP is concerned in that lane. So got to feel good for Zapman for how much pressure has been put on him. And on this right side, and talking about Scream specifically, every chance that he has had for an engage, whether it be in the solo lane or in the dual lane, Ronngyu has been hot on his heels and has had that disarm on the ready.
Yeah, Ronngyu playing a very good spoiler game to Scream. Panitom, on the other hand, I don't feel like we've seen him around too often, a bit more often over in the solo lane. I suppose concerned about the pressure that would normally be going towards this Cthulhu, but Scream just rotates through for like first blue buff invade, and then afterwards has since just been trying to put pressure on that duo side of the map. So split engagements between these junglers. Scream more often than not on the left, and Panitom more often than not on the right. Scream back on the left. Would love to put some pressure into Zapman, but Zap's in that tower. I don't think he's coming out anytime soon.
Yeah, Zapman will be happy to stick by that tower if need be. His beats are back up, so even if Scream does find a nice blink engage onto him, but instead it could be Panitom that could be caught out by Scream. I think Panitom recognizes that somebody has got to be around this wall just because of how Stuart's even positioned himself around the jungle. So Panitom won't walk over to the left. It will be a blink engage by Scream on that side, though. Gets the beads out of Zap. Zapman turns around, misses the stun. Now, I don't know if you want to go back in there. Does transform into the Cthulhu's. Got some backup now. Sheento, Panitom, and Ronngyu have all rotated over. Scream has got to use the death immunity from his ultimate to get out Stuart. Chunked down to about a quarter of his HP. Scream is the first one down, and Stuart might just be the next one as 3 Leviathans have chased him under the tower. And Inbound, not much to go. Finds a nice pull, a nice triple knockup. And the shell and the heal might be enough to keep him alive for a little while longer. Panitom soaks up the tower, but at the end of the day, it's a 3 swing for the Levi's.
The Levi's were biding their time. Zapman was biding his time, waiting for the Solar Scarabs to overextend on their hot pursuit of his life over the last 12 minutes. Finally, a transformation into the Cthulhu buys time for the entirety of the Leviathans to work their way towards this lane. Sheento jumps into a shadow, and the Solar Scarabs, even with the Sanctified Fields, cannot escape the Leviathans re-engage. Descent into Madness pretty strong on both sides of the map. Maybe that's why we're seeing the Morrigan in the dual lane. You want access to that Cthulhu ultimate at all portions of the match. And, well, they've got it. The Leviathans, as long as Zapman is willing to transform into Jarcorrr, can always have access to some sort of tool to deal with Stuart.
We see now the Leviathans have been able to take a lead by getting those few kills. If we take a look just at the gold alone, about 1,600 up for the Leviathans. The experience you can see is starting to trickle their way as well. 3,700, so doubly so from what the gold has been. A big swing for Leviathans, a triple pick during that last team fight under the enemy tier 1 tower. Inbound able to at least get some good CC, found a triple knockup, a big heal, a root right after, but just not enough. So the Solar Scarabs, they'll answer that rotation from earlier, their failed fight with a Pyromancer of their own.
Just keeping that gold lead to as close to minimum as possible. Stuart and Zapman seem to have traded roles, actually hiding inside of his own Tier 2 tower is the ADC of the Solar Scarabs. Heavy presence from the Leviathans on the left side of the map. But I like the call from the Solar Scarabs to try and shift their attention a bit away. Because Gold Fury normally is not an early option, but it's burning quick.
Yeah, it's going down with 4 people here. Not a chance that Inbound can get in there and even attempt to steal this one. So the Pyromancer that the Scarabs worked so hard for just moments ago to make sure that they could grab and close up that gold lead has been instantly nullified once again at 2K gold up for the Leviathans.
Doug, can we get a look at the damage chart? I just want to get a timer on when we're going to get the Zapman 9K. Okay.
About a third of the way.
We are a ways off. I mean, when you're only taking one team fight or one fight in general over the course of the last 14 minutes, I suppose 3,000 a bit par of the course. Actually, not too far behind the highest. Stuart now forced to use the Sanctified Fields defensively, which means the Solar Scarabs should not be playing on this side of the map until that's back up. No CDR just yet for Stu means it's going to be a good bit of time until that ultimate is up and ready. No neutral objectives to fight over the map for both teams means that it should just be a return back to neutral farm. And for the most part, the Solar Scarabs have been doing a pretty decent job of just splitting farm on the map, controlling the right mid camps for the most part, Greater Scorpions going their way. If the game is going to reset itself to neutral, the Solar Scarabs should be able to close up a bit of this lead before the next team fight.
And one of the things I've noticed, at least with Stuart in this game, is he hasn't really gotten a chance to use that Sanctified Field offensively. It's always been off of, well, we tried to start a team fight, and it didn't go so well. Now we got 3 people here. Let me drop my ult and leave. Or in that case, he's, well, I'm going to try and start a fight with Zapman. Oh, no, there's another person here. Let me drop my ult and just hope that they walk away from me. I got to imagine for the Scarabs, that turning point is when Stuart can use that ult offensively during a team fight.
Might be a little while, I'm thinking. You've not gone for the fastest build on the Olorun. Typhon's Fang in second slot. Ronngyu in some trouble. Stinger no good. Time to run away, Scarabs.
Oh, how far can they run? For Inbound, it's not too far. Does find a knock-up on only Ronngyu. Zapman is rotated over, finds a double stun, finds the double Dark Omen, and a transformation into the Cthulhu. Zapman waiting to go up and descend to the Manus. We use the entirety of the kit before he jumps on in. Boronic running away from Zapman. That Stinger is not there to help him out. Scream is low. AoE damage from Zap, but not enough to close out one of those kills just yet. Scream able to get away, and Panitom, though, finds 2, and it's Boronic and Inbound. Gone Scary D doing his best to find anything, but he missed the shot on the Zapman. The stun connects. A Dark Omen right after. Zapman is somehow still alive, but does go down at the end of the day.
Scary D shouldn't be too long for this world afterwards, so return kill from the Leviathans. Gotta think Zapman just didn't need to stun him. It was like 200 damage and he was already surrounded and did not have ultimate. Feel like the Leviathan's ADC could have survived, but with the pacing of game 1, I'm sure Zapman would like to just deal some damage, so that's exactly what he does. The Solar Scarabs, yet again, choose that engagement. It was them initiating, but a poor placement of Boronic's ultimate. Ronngyu finds full value from his Draconic transformation. Zapman gets the better end of the rotation, double stun to start off the fight, and the Leviathans have extended their lead massively. Team fights all going in their favor.
Well, Zapman was at 3388 going into that team fight for damage, and is now at 6443. So
you get nervous?
Over 3,000 damage. I'm kind of prepping. I almost feel like I need to like mentally prep myself to get it ready. But Zapman is one good team fight away from breaking the 9K that the desk was asking for. Nobody's gotten to that 9K just yet. Still only top of the charts at 7,500. But that's 4 players on the Levi's at top of the damage charts, and then all of the rest of the Scarabs, and then Ronngyu sitting down at the bottom. But as a Fafnir, you're not really aiming for top of the damage charts.
No, he's aiming to facilitate team fights, and I'd argue he's done so nearly perfectly. 7 out of 8 participated in kills. Ronngyu dropping 0 deaths on the way to that as well. He's aiming for the perfect support slash line. The Solar Scarabs aiming for a gank on a Zapman with Inbound hovering nearby, but unsuccessful. If Zapman isn't going to be with his team and if he doesn't have the changeling available, Zapman ain't stepping up for the engagement.
We've seen that song and dance on the left side one too many times now, and it hasn't been going in favor of the Solar Scarabs this game at the least. The turning point for the Scarabs was an overextension by Jarcorrr on the right side last game on a much squishier god, albeit with that Camazotz. Maybe a little bit harder to find one of those picks, even though Jarcorrr, well, he's in the same position that he was, 2 levels up against Scary D, but Leviathans have a much better lead to fight into this time around and a much tankier squad to deal with them.
Yeah, the Solar Scarabs so much further behind than they once were. But even with the team fights going as handily to the Leviathans, every single time the game resets itself to just farming on the map, the Solar Scarabs cut that gold lead by at least 1,000. Leviathans will re-extend it with this Pyromancer, as they are able to take it. Screammmmm Scary D not able to steal away despite being relatively close to the objective. So D6 neutrals means that now the Leviathans can regroup, work their way over to the left. Primal Fury has just respawned. Clear out your camp, spend your gold, pull the objective, and force another team fight. Team fights were always a strong point for the Leviathans as a team. Compositionally, strong point here as well. The Cthulhu, or Cthulhu 2, just doesn't really have a great answer from the Solar Scarabs, not just yet.
We do have a single set of kin size out of Screammmmm. Doesn't seem like Boronic is going to be building into that anytime soon. Going to rely on a lot of the Stinger pressure to go for there. But if you want to talk about pressure, it's all about objectives for Leviathans. Primal Fury stands no chance when there are 4 members completely batting away at its HP bar. Leviathans have upped their gold lead yet again. Now we sit at 5,000 up for the Order side team. 6K experience as well. The Leviathans are just, I can't even say slowly, they are just creeping their way up on the gold charts every few minutes of this game.
It's similar to the rise that we saw from the Solar Scarabs in Game 1. Maybe a bit faster from the Scarabs as it was off the back of one massive team fight. But pacing-wise, 20-some-odd minutes into the game, we're at about the exact same position. The Solar Scarabs, though, have got some phenomenal scaling. Boronic on this AMC, Stuart on the Olorun, Kali for Screammmmm, one of Screammm's best picks. Just needs some time to start spinning up, to get ready, to get a couple more items, and then the fight back will be a bit better from the Solar Scarabs. Leviathans, though, they're similarly continually getting stronger, and they're just doing it faster.
Scary D walks up to try and fight Jarcorrr, ends up meeting with Panitom now, but once he gets that tier 1 tower, I don't imagine there's too much dive from the Leviathans on towards this Osiris, especially the fact that Scary D still has his ultimate available to him, and plenty of protections to deal with what Panitom can throw his way. But I thought maybe with Sheento rotating over, could see a re-engage, or at least just some damage on that tier 1 tower. Would be the first one to go down this set, and it does so, or this game. And it does. Panitom gets rooted in, inbound. Doesn't go for the pull, just instead uses the Wisp just to keep himself topped off.
I think Inbound saw how many members of the Leviathans were nearby and said, maybe I don't want Panitom right on top of me right now. Maybe I don't want to take this fight on the Leviathans tower line when we're down almost 5,000-6,000 gold as a team. So instead walks himself out of there. The Solar Scarabs have completely abandoned their increasingly aggressive style of play. It was gank after gank after gank attempt, both in the solo and duo lane from the Solar Scarabs for the first 15 or so minutes. Since then, it's been mainly just damage control. Where can we get some farm on the map? How do we slow this down? And every single time the Leviathans say, sure, slow it down, because Gold Fury's spawning, or Pyromancer's spawning, and then they immediately go there, and it's been minimal response from the Solar Scarabs. They're going to have to create an answer eventually. If the Leviathans maintain this pace and just walk over towards the Fire Giant, take it, I'm not sure how strong this Solar Scarab's base defense is. You don't have a standard mage in your composition, so keeping minion waves out, not exactly the easiest thing. AMC has a hard time in those defense situations because he's going to be the recipient of the dive for the most part. Same for Stuart, and Stuart doesn't even have Sanctified Fields as a defensive tool if both Zapman and Jarcorrr are descended into madness and just continually CCing and applying damage. So the Solar Scarabs, I think, fast approaching is a time where they have to take a fight in neutral territory. It's probably going to be around this Fire Giant.
And it makes it even doubly hard considering the X item that Ronngyu picked up in his build after that Gauntlet of Thieves, the Emperor's Armor. Going to make it even harder for them to defend under a Phoenix that's just attacking slower at that point. Not going to be hitting nearly as many times. And a Shogun's Kasari from Ronngyu means that Zapman, Sheento, Panitom, everybody on their team is going to be attacking a little bit faster. And well, Sheento's already swinging pretty fast and pretty hard. Add a little bit more to that. Makes it for a rough time. Triple shell on the side of the Scarabs, I think is something that we keep seeing a lot more often these days when a lot of the burst compositions have kind of been going away. We've been seeing a stray away from these Aegises.
Yeah, and you just want to be able to return damage. That's why you pick up Shell. You pop Aegis, you're just walking away. You pop Shell, you can at least fight back while you've got the HP shield. So triple Shell might even just give like everybody on your team, if you're timing it properly, like a Nike ultimate. Like it is a whole lot of defensive capacity from the Solar Scarabs, but it's a high execution strategy. I'll be keeping my eyes on those shell timers. If they're ever in sync, somebody made a mistake.
for now, the Leviathans have just gone back to farming up the map. Again, with only one tower taken off so far, and that being the solo lane tier 1, probably the least valuable one to have to deal with on the map in general. Leviathans just biding their time. I mean, Pyromancer's about to respawn, so maybe they're setting up for another push towards that objective, but everybody's leaving there. Instead, a fight over towards Screammmmm. A big slice dice puts him at half HP. Destruction used, but he's not going to have very much to go beyond there, especially when Sheento rotates on over. And, well, I guess Zapman wanted to be a part of the action as well. Transforms into the Chernobog and joins the fight to maybe just set up for this Fire Giant?
Yeah, but that was a whole lot for just Screammmmm. I know Screammm's like a major part of the Solar Scarab's win condition on this Kali, but that many ultimates, now you've only got one Cthulhu to descend into madness. Maybe the Solar Scarabs can put some fight up here.
Boronic, inbound and Scary D here. Stuart a little bit further away from the fight. The Fire Giant still being held onto by a couple. The rest of the Scarabs are now fighting the Leviathans. Boronic half HP. Jarcorrr does descend up to its Scary D. The Fire Giant never got leashed. Sheento gets out of the pit. Panitom's still in it. Finally, Fire Giant will go away. A triple knockup from Jarcorrr to separate the fight out in a sanctified field from Stuart to guarantee no further chase, but the Leviathans go right back to the objective and take the fire.
Good play from the Leviathans. They reset only when Scary D gets in range to defend, and from there, the Leviathans force him back out. Sheento resets towards his own side of the map, walks back in once Scary D is pushed towards those back camps, makes sure Fire Giant doesn't regenerate too much of its HP. Had they fully reset, the Leviathans that is, probably gives another opportunity over the Solar Scarabs to try and slow them down once more. Instead, love that play. Just really methodical, making sure that it was never a coin toss. It was always guaranteed. And Leviathans now have the largest neutral objective on all 5 of their belts and plenty of towers, 5 of them, to clear out on the Solar Scarab side of the map. I would argue that the gold lead is large enough already going into this initial Fire Giant siege that you are likely aiming for a Phoenix. I know last game it was about a 19-20 some odd minute Fire Giant. Okay, well maybe, yeah, Phoenix looking a whole lot easier now.
Okay, Boronic just died in a 1v1 up against Panitom. It was an ult for ult trade, but I guess just a little bit too much damage for Boronic to deal with in that little standoff. So the Leviathans find themselves an easy pick, and now these towers can just start going down easily. The Solar Scarabs have lost out on a major portion of their defense at these structures.
Yeah, so the Solar Scarabs not even putting up a defense on the tier 2 as the Leviathans extending this gold lead massively and can now start to look towards this left side Phoenix. 20 seconds left on the respawn. Phoenix going quick.
Zapman in the backline. Jarcorrr into the Descent into Madness. Inbound steps forward, and so does Scary D to try and slow down Zapman. Zapman finds a massive turnaround stun. Sheento picks up the credit for the kill, and Zapman transforms into the Chernobog of his own and tips over that 9,000 damage that we've been waiting for. And a triple knockup by Jarcorrr, the follow-up by Zapman and Sheento. The Solar Scarabs collapse at the hands of the Leviathans. The left side Phoenix will fall down to the minions shortly, and the Titan should go down to the Levi's just as quickly. Only Boronic and Scary D to defend, and Boronic already forced back. Jarcorrr goes in, Boronic goes down. Zapman finds another pick, and the Titan will fall. And Mifflin, we are going to yet another Solar Scarabs Game 3 with the double on Zap.
The Leviathans, they didn't say it, but we've heard it from plenty of pros. 2-0-3 if we're trolling. That game was so convincing. Had they said it to me, I'm voting Leviathans Game 3. That was a dominant performance. Just every single strategy devised by the Solar Scarabs dealt with adeptly by the Leviathans. Solar Scarabs needed a lead throughout the early. They needed to shut down Zapman. They needed to be invading those blue buffs on both sides of the map, or on the Levi side of the map around the Cthulhu. None of it worked.
No.
1 blue buff invade early, 5 attempted ganks on Zapman, and no kills. Just clean play from the Levi's, who bided their time and waited for their opportunity to group up, play as 5, and generally when the Levi's get to play as 5, they just win.
And not a single opportunity for Stuart to use that ultimate offensively every single time, using it to run away, to tell somebody, please stay away from me, I don't want to take this fight. And you're not going to win too many of those when you don't have that ability to do so. Solar Scarabs fall down in game number 2. Leviathans bring us to game 3. Can they close it out, or can the Scarabs finally find their first set win on going on to at least those 3? We'll find out right after this.
your shop. We're about to pop. Whatever I do, not up to you. We're gonna shut it up. La la la. Let's stop, won't stop. Unlock your shop. Whatever you do, not up to you. We're gonna shut it up. Today I found out what I want. It's everything I never had. It's been a lifetime feeling sad, feeling sorry for the things that might make you mad. But I'm back, who's back? You ain't even sorry. All you do is make people around you damn worried. I know it might sound just a little bit corny. Now I know where I stand. Don't even have a plan. Unlock your shop. We're about to pop. Whatever I do, not up to you. We're gonna shut it up. La la la. Let's stop, won't stop. Unlock your shop. Whatever you do, not up to you. We're gonna shut it up. Just like royalty, someone's too. It's time for you. Just do whatever you want. Unlock your shop. We're about to pop. Whatever I do, not up to you. We're gonna shut it up. Let's stop, won't stop. Unlock your shop. Whatever you do, not up to you. We're gonna shut it up. Last night we had something. Tonight I'll be guessing. But I don't really have a case. You don't have to mention. You just like their attention. It's written all over your face. I don't wanna play the quiet type when I'm near you. Reading old messages on my phone every time I see you. Tell me, is this part of an act just to keep your image intact? If you think that strategy's smart, I'm not gonna defend my beating heart. Defend my beating heart. You knocked on my window and slept on my pillow, then said you had found your place. Not sure if I want this. You don't think that I notice. This isn't like giving you space. I don't wanna play the quiet type when I'm near you. Pretending that I don't know who you are every time I see you. Tell me, is this part of an act just to keep your image intact? If you think that strategy's smart, I'm not gonna defend my beating heart.
Well. What do we have here? We have a game number 3 with the Solar Scarabs and the Atlantis Leviathans. And this one will go the distance. Only makes sense to end the halfway point of the phase with another Game 3 for the Solar Scarabs. Now, what is not decided is the outcome. The Solar Scarabs look great in Game 1. They're there in Game 2. Leviathans look, I mean, we're going to talk about Game 2. Leviathans look amazing in this one. Now it's time for the Scarabs to adapt. But we got to talk about what the Leviathans did right here in Game number 2, Gore. And it was a little bit of everything. I mean, it started in picks and bans. And ended with the Titan dropping. All of it worked for the Leviathans.
So Olorun, Osiris, and then the Amus and Cobb were the top 3 for the Scarabs. Morrigan shows up on the other side. And then, we were talking a lot about the Cthulhu. But I think there was a certain point where no matter what you do for those bottom 2 bans, something's going to get through that is that's going to be problematic for your draft. I think the Daji and the Susano were good bans, right? I don't think the Scarabs mess up anything there. I think it just comes down to the fact that, unfortunately, they put themselves a little bit too much into one single corner, and that allowed the Cthulhu to exist, it allowed a Morrigan Cthulhu combo to exist, and it allowed this Nemesis to be on the side of those picks. And you can see a 10.0 KDA. Panitom, who I'll just call it out, was roughly absent from Game number 1, came in very much in handy there in Game number 2. I mean, just big plays for him, very big disruptive team fights. And, we talk about the Cthulhu as something to disrupt the Olorun. Half the time it didn't even matter there. I mean, you see this isn't even through the Sanctified Fields until the very end of it. A majority of that was just the knock-up, just the clean team play. From the Leviathans, causing a lot of trouble. I think very organized, very much what you expect from them when you think about how this team plays and how they get to team fights. Everybody stepped up, right? You get a lot more out of Zapman that game than you did in Game number 1. 4-0-5 there for Sheento, 1-0-11, as well as 1-0-9 for your 2 frontliners in Ronngyu and Jarcorrr. And then we had highlighted already, but I'm going to double down on it. A 10.0 KDA for Panitom means that the Nemesis kind of got to pop off. And so everybody on the Leviathans just feels like they did more that game.
Agreed. And look, I still want to rewind a bit, because I think Daji was the right ban, as you already mentioned, for the Solar Scarabs. Because think about a Daji into an AMC or an Olorun.
You're crying if you're AMC and Olorun.
And then it's also a double Daji, right? I mean, if it's a Morrigan and a second Daji, that feels horrible. Susano, I think, brings that opportunity as well. Like, if you're really splitting hairs, like, maybe also ban the Cthulhu, see what the Susano brings. I mean...
there's that weird, I guess see what the Susano brings is like the... But even then, I've seen Panitom Susano.
Again,
I've seen Panitom play that.
I will say that I think zooming too much in on those final 2 bans is taking away a lot from the Leviathans and putting too much on just what 2 bans changed. Ultimately, it feels like that style of composition was just going to work from the Leviathans, whether it was a Cthulhu, whether it was a Daji in the jungle, whether it was a Nemesis.
It's the chess game that is picks and bans prior to the actual play on field.
Right. Like, through the first 3, the Leviathans had the Scarabs in check, right? And then regardless of the moves they made, it just felt like the Leviathans had a great composition built for the first 3, and then the game mirrored a lot of that. So now picks and bans for Game number 3, all important for the Solar Scarabs, especially moving into what hopefully for them will be a win here in Game 3, because Scary D talks about it in the pregame interview. This team just needs to get some momentum building, some momentum rolling, and who knows. And so, this is another great opportunity for the Solar Scarabs to get there, as the E-Set, the Morrigan, and the Uller, 3 all potential Zapman or Sheento bans, depending on how you want to look at it. And then on the flip side, Yamoja, Freya, and Chernobog all taken away. So we will, Gore, have to see some flexibility with the Hunters here in Game 3.
I actually think that's a big deal. Again, small things like this, small sample size doesn't mean a whole ton, but Chernobog's won both games this set from first pick. And so being able to limit that's going to be, I think, better for everybody. Just slows down. I mean, he hits really hard. He has good clear. He's safe in lane. Great rotations. Looking back on it, the other 2 times he was first picked this week, he also won those games, so it just feels like someone that needs to be limited. He's been a very popular ban, and I think for that reason, right? You're just a very solid hunter pick in lane, and then when it comes to team fights, you're going to out-rotate pretty much every other hunter, actually just every other hunter. And then, the few that can keep up with him or have the same rotationary power are delayed enough. Like an Apollo isn't even in the meta, but like if he's there, Chariot ride time all the way over.
Yep.
If you're looking at Jingwei, you have to back, then use your passive to fly in, and then it only gets you so far. Again, a lot of the people that can keep up with him are just very, very difficult to, or either not in the meta or it takes too long, so you don't get too much out of it. I think that that's a really good ban, but it does leave so many high priority. I mean, last time it was the Erlang Shen. The Bastet has also been banned out both times by the Leviathan so far. AMC's still on the board. There's still a lot of high priority targets out there.
Yeah, RDO for Hardcore, good start for the Leviathans. It's a tried and true pick. You know what you're getting there. Huang as well. Later in the game for Sheento. Gonna have high damage numbers. Hopefully dueling dragons gets you some pulls in and some setup for the rest of your team. But the burst damage, even without the ultimate, very, very strong. So Erlang Shen for Scream. Good start. Yes, how do we build on that now if we're the Solar Scarabs? We've already seen what happens if you reveal too much in your first couple of picks. And the Leviathans still have 3 potential counter pick spots, depending on what the Solar Scarabs end up drafting here.
Man, it's been a long time since we gotten to talk about like the counter capabilities of like second pick, right? Like being like it used to be, and that was like the biggest deal in the way back when was solo lane specifically. You would see second pick wait almost entirely till that last one because that's when it was important. But having that, like you said, like you get a little bit more vision on what you're going up against here.
I mean, because right now yes, some lane matchups are like better or worse as far as finding pressure, right? But it's, I feel like nowadays it sets up more for like blue buff invades, things like that. Sure, it can find you pressure in lane.
A lot of it now is definitely team-based,
we're talking about
not
team
matchup.
Right, we're talking about like team fight later in the game. How does this slot into a team? How does this counter out a team fight type draft from one team or the other? There are moments, of course, just to cover our bases, where, you know, a certain solo lane matchup might open up to solo kills or jungle pressure more often, but so often when we're talking about counter picks, it's really about the team fight phase, because the laning phase, at least at this level, if played properly, tends to be a bit slower and really hinges on the junglers and where they end up rotating around throughout the map. So the Daj Igor was banned out at the end of the picks and bans for Game 2, left open here. And the Daji for Panitom carries a lot of weight with it. And you look at the Erlang Shen, the Ho Yi. And so on the flip side, now you're looking for a pick from Boronic, right? And so whatever Boronic is going to end up playing in mid, with the Daji there, with an RDO, feels like there's got to be a bit of safety baked into that kit somewhere to keep him alive with all the pressure.
You want to look for someone, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. The perfect person against this would have been Huang. Immediately to my mind. There's maybe a couple others. Again, anybody that might have a CC Immune ult or CC immunity in their kit. This is a rare moment where I'm starting to think like Zeros as a mid laner like is someone that I always think is doing things right, because guess what? He always had a Chang'e in the back pocket. And I feel like a Chang'e, like I see this comp and I think, hey, that immunity, like just having that more often is nice. Her 1 does enough damage. Her healing's nice. Her stun's okay. But, like, she's just not as potent, I think, as some of the other mages. I think when I see the amount of CC on the other side, having that capability to get out might be helpful. But it all depends on Boronic. Giannis can also be interesting. I mean, you'd probably have to use your ult more often than not. That's something that Boronic actually has in his wheelhouse. We've seen consistently. You might have to use your ult very defensively pretty often, especially now that there's a Fields of Love on the table as well. But I think that anything like that, anywhere that you can get yourself out of there, whether it's through movement speed, like over the wall, if it's just CC immunity in the ultimate, anything that gives you that small little leverage is going to be a big opener to slow this down, because the RDO CC is going to be consistent through team fights. Daji, the ults, you already got 3 people that are getting pulled, right? Yeah, so you got to figure out where you're going to go with it. And then I think that you haven't even seen the tank just yet from what Ronngyu is going to be bringing.
Now, I'll admit, Core, again, you know, the Scarabs, they have their own draft strategy. They have their own threats on the opposing team and want to play into their own strengths. You and I were talking about maybe needing some safety, specifically because of the Daji. And now that's putting a lot into one pick. Kukulkan doesn't scream safety to me. Of course, can speed himself up, run around, but going to have to lean heavily on beads. Going to have Fields of Love to work through. And so Fafnir ends the draft for the Atlantis Leviathans. Nothing changes all that heavily with the Fafnir lock-in. additional attack speed with the AoE coerce. So, look at both of these teams here, Gore. What are some standouts on both sides? Where do you think the pressure may lie from the Leviathans to the Scarabs and vice versa?
I think Leviathans have better, well, maybe not better, more consistent CC that we're going to get to see. Admittedly, you've got the hammer, like you said, single target, heart bomb, single target. Artio is going to be able to put in a lot of work, but you've got the Huang route as well, and that's all excluding the Daji ult. So I think there's a lot of potential for team fights, groupings, things like that for the Leviathans. The Scarabs, though, I think the Erlang Shen popped off really hard. Good damage, really good taunt on the ultimate. Khepri has the res as well, so that immediately feels great. And then when you look at it, even though they don't have the CC immune ults, you get a lot of good damage from the Suns on a Ho Yi, and he's one of the best boxers, so going up against this Cupid is going to be an interesting matchup for them. But also I think Kukulkan, you've got a lot of damage, a lot of capabilities for burst, secure, and objectives, things like that you don't get out of mages like Yu Huang. And then I just love Kukulkan because he does good team fight, and that's it.
Yeah, you know, Gore, we don't often get the Kukulkan and Kukulkan in the same.
And that, for the fun fact out there, for anybody out there who's like, man, why do they what's the point of emphasize? It's because Kukulkan and Kukulkan.
Yep.
Yeah, have fun with that.
For this exact moment.
That's J-Mac right now. Have fun with that. He's shaking his head.
Yeah, I think like day one of starting casting Smite, we talked about what pronunciation
Well, I was like,
should be,
not only that, I think we
that.
even had like a sit down with Ajax at one point where they were like, guys, please like say Kukulkan because it sounds too much like Kukulkan.
Oh, so it was more from the other side. I remember Aggro told us he was always an inside agent for the design team.
He's been working against us the whole time.
He
even sabotaged me.
Gore, all right. So look, this is an important game number 3 here for the Solar Scarabs. Break the game 3 curse. Atlantis Leviathans want to continue their run, and remember, with a win here, put themselves right in the mix as far as top spot here in the league. What a run the Atlantis Leviathans have had over their last couple of matchups. My eyes go to Daji here, Gore, for the Leviathans. What can Panitom get done? What types of beads can you burn on the flip side, set up for Fields of Love, things like that? Who on the Solar Scarab stands out to you?
I think the Erlang Shen almost immediately because of what he's going to bring. I think a lot of that presence from the jungle from Scream has been what the Scarabs have relied on all year, but also has been and will be in this matchup what sets up things like the Kukulkan and keeping them ahead.
Well, Gore Miser, it is a game 3 for the Solar Scarabs and the Atlantis Leviathans. Can the Scarabs break the curse? We'll go into game 3 to find out.
Thank you so much. I mean, we've been here so many times, Mifflin, through Phase 1, through Phase 2, through even Season 8 with the Scarabs. They've gotten to game 3s, but now it's time for them to close that game 3 out against the Leviathans if they want to at least make their mark in Phase 2 of the SPL here in Season number 9. And yeah, it's going to suck having to deal with Kukulkan and Kukulkan Mifflin. That's going to definitely throw me off. I will say, now this is a shout back to my collegiate years of casting, not the worst thing I've had to deal with in a game. I had a game with 3 players named Wet Village, West Village, and Weast Village. That was not a fun day.
One time, I had to deal with a name change. That was pretty tough.
Yeah, like Big Slim Timmy Jim.
No, I was thinking like SPL. Like Scary D was Belair for a little bit.
Oh yeah, that was a tough one.
And I was like, yeah, that's about as far as my difficulties go.
Zapman and Ginny from the block.
Dude,
at one point.
that weren't me, but I'm a big Jenny from the block fan.
That's what, season 1, season 2. God, that's a throwback. That makes me feel old now, considering I even remember it at that point through. But back into this one, game 3, Solar Scarabs and Leviathans. I think Gore sets it up perfectly as far as where the Scarabs need to find their aggression, their pace setting. A lot of that's going to come off the back of Scream on this Erlang.
Yeah, so keep your eyes on Scream, who has already got his eyes on Panitom. Transformation from Scary D on this side of the map as well. Panitom path back towards solo would have likely have lost his life. But I think there are also some interesting interactions that the Deaths may have missed out on. The slow immunity from Boronic should deal with Fields of Love, as well as the bouncing slow from Ronngyu. So as long as Boronic himself isn't the recipient of the stun from Fafnir or a stun from Zapman, pretty unlikely that a lot of the CC tools are going to stick to him, even up against Jarcorrr. That root does apply a slow first. Boronic should be able to avoid that one. CC immunity, the name of the game, though, when you're playing against Daji. Kukulkan, well, how do they want to say? Kukulkan doesn't really have any of that built in, but he is going to be sitting inside of his tower pretty often. Walk up, slither up, rather. Tornado the wave, back to the tower, rinse, repeat. Eventually, he'll take over to level 20, and that's his strat.
Boronic doesn't want to have to fight if he doesn't need to. I mean, that's always been the MO of these Kukulkan gameplay is you walk up, you clear the wave, and you wait until your next item is ready to go. In this case, it's going to be a rush in towards a Book of Thought, double dipping into his passive, and just getting a major power spike item. Now, I'm curious if Boronic is going to go towards the double stack, because we've seen the Book of Thought plus Warlock Staff. Maybe throw a Charon's Coin if you want to go for a triple stack kind of output there, but we'll keep our eyes on Boronic's build. Panitom playing aggressive at the red buff. Boronic not going to bite the bait walking into enemy jungle, because surely would have been collapsed on and killed there.
Yeah, so where is Scream while the red buff is being invaded? He's taken away the speed on the opposite side. Not even missing out on too much farm, Boronic that is. He should be able to clear out those back camps, but it does open the door for this, an early rotation over towards the duo inbound. Got a whole lot of aggression on him, just wants to confirm that purple buff for himself. This is risky.
Inbound does have the hog, used it to confirm, uses his beads, finds a double root, but doesn't matter if there is a root. Zapman can dash right past him and close up the first kill of the game for Leviathans, and finally for Leviathans in this third game, able to find that first blood. But what is Scream's response? Going up towards the enemy purple buff for an invade of his own. With that Mannequin Scepter, even still having that, should not be able to out-confirm the fact that Ronngyu is holding on to his own hog.
And Ronngyu doesn't have to trade out his life for his purple buff, so farm over to the Leviathan support player. Scream does not just attempt the purple buff invade, does get the speed and the red from the Leviathans, so good bit of farm stripped away. Invading, of course, in SMITE, not as valuable for the actual invader. You get a whole lot less gold than you would have if you were just clearing out one of your own camps, so maybe a slight disadvantage for Scream himself. But because Panitom was spending his entire time invading as well and gets a little bit less, actually a lead for Scream on the Erlang Shen. Ticks over to 4 a couple of moments before Panitom does. Pacing as it is, really just the first blood separating these teams.
You see a very slight XP lead for Scary D as well. He was level 5 before that wave collided. Jarcorrr just hits level 5 by clearing that one out. You saw that there was no blue on Jarcorrr, so not just that speed invaded, but a blue as well. So Solo Scarabs, at least for Scream, making some pressure on one side of the map, but Leviathans, where all the pressure had been put on them in games 1 and attempted pressure in game number 2 over in this dual lane. Zapman getting that first blood is good. Spirit of the Nine wins. Just off the mark on a Jarcorrr, but with 3 bodies there, not a chance that the bear gets out. Boronic picks up the first kill for the Scarabs.
Jarcorrr probably caught off guard there, thinking, no way Boronic's making a rotation this early, right? No way this Kukulkan isn't inside his tier 1 tower. That was the case, and now Scream can continue his aggression in the enemy jungle. Speed buff looked at yet again. What a rotation from the Leviathans, not so far off. Panitom nearby, not level 5 and not willing to take the engagement. Misses out on another speed. That's twice now it's been invaded. And that is not an invade we get to see so often. That speed buff is deep on your side of the map.
But it is a strategy that we saw kind of at the tail end of Season 8 to try and deal with them. I believe it was the Scarabs who pulled that same strat against Panitom. At that time, he was playing the Susano, and it was constant pressure and invades on the speed buff. Don't allow Panitom to ever get that buff. There were 2-3 people constantly sitting there waiting for Panitom to try and walk up, and if he did, they would just kill him. If they didn't, then it would just be an invade of the speed buff. So maybe trying to reprise that same mindset for the Solar Scarabs to try and keep the jungler down. It's at least been able to keep the game back to even pace now that first blood bounty the Leviathans did have as far as the gold lead has been mitigated away. Solar Scarabs even it up.
I wonder about that, right? With the towers as strong as they are nowadays, it's so difficult to actually gank these lanes if they're playing defensively. If Jarcorrr doesn't want to die, he's just not going to die. If you choose to not make plays in lane and instead just farm up, wait for the late game, wait for the team fight, that's a pretty easy strategy to employ. The only role in the game that doesn't have that opportunity, or maybe 2 roles, is jungle and support. Because there are no towers in the jungle. You can just have the Solar Scarabs continually walk down these buffs, find your aggression there. Consider them mini POIs, mini neutral objectives on the map. So the Leviathans will be forced into a position where either you just keep losing out on your buffs, or you have to take the engagement. It's an engagement that favors the Solar Scarabs, as Scream has already ticked over to level 6 and has Golden Blade finished up. So I like it. If you can't dive Jarcorrr, if Zapman is playing too safe in the lane, where do you put your pressure? Unfortunately for the Levi's jungler, it's probably on him.
And for the Levi solo laner, because that's yet another blue buff invade. Panitom is waiting at his speed buff this time, but Scream and Scary D are on their way, or at least Scream is to try and go for this fight. Can Panitom clear it out in time? Yes, he does, but he's got a red buff around his waist from an invade earlier on. I can't even say an invade. I think he just picked up Sheento's speed buff, said, hey, I need this. Stuart needs a little bit of help. Heart Bomb does hit, but very patient on the Relic, not using the beads inside that ultimate.
I like what we saw from Stuart there too. Just smart positioning, tries to get behind his own archers to make sure Heart Bomb wasn't there for the follow-up. And in holding on to the beads, Stuart doesn't have to concern himself, right? Clearly Zapman has not got the damage output just yet to actually kill you, even if everything is landing. The only threat to Stuart in this lane is CC from Panitom or Ronngyu. And the way to deal with that is by maintaining your beads. So smart play from the Solar Scarabs ADC.
Heart Bomb hits the camp at the least there, so Stuart won't deal at least too much damage to himself by eating that from Zapman. Inbound is here, but it's only to deter Ronngyu and Zapman from pushing any further up the lane or closer towards these towers. Maybe with Inbound up there. Stuart had to go back to base, though, not wanting to stick around at half HP. Does have enough gold to finish up his Iqbal and tier 1 towards his Light Blade.
Purple buff invade is successful for the Leviathans, so Zapman finding himself a little bit more farm. And looking at the builds, Transcendence in the first slot, Thebes as well for Ronngyu, Warlock Staff looked at for Sheento. Slow builds across the board. The Leviathans stacking up their strength, getting ready to group up. Similarly, some members of the Solar Scarabs have gone for some pretty slow builds themselves. Gone with Thebes for Inbound, double stack pretty shortly for Boronic. Both of these teams really just want to play around that mid to late game, except for Scream and Stuart to a certain extent with Icavale in that first slot. Scream wants to get involved now, and he's been doing a very good job of it. Otherwise, the rest of the Solar Scarabs, they've got their eyes on the horizon.
Yeah, Boronic will definitely be waiting a little while. He just got that Warlocks finished up now and has a fresh wave being held by Scream and Inbound. What good teammates to hold on to the mid wave for their mid laner, allow him to maybe get a few of those stacks. I say that Scream took a couple of them away at that moment there, but for now, Scary D fighting up against Jarcorrr. Scream on the way, 2 versus 2. Once Scream gets here, Scary D helps, gets the taunt, gets the knockout on Panitom, and Panitom cannot get to the Powwow. The damage output between Scream and Scary D is too much for the jungler of the Levi's.
Blue buff invade successful. Scary D gonna be able to walk out with that one. Scream can take out the rest of the jungle. Speed buff up as well, but stopping for the back camps actually. 2 seconds on Panitom's respawn. Scream will not actually approach the speed buff. Instead, just happy, able to take away a life and a couple of camps as well as the Greater Scorpion. Some global gold over to the Solar Scarabs, who have net themselves about a 1,500 gold lead. Experience, though, massive already. Didn't even realize where is all of that.
There.
For the most part in the jungle. Nearly 2 levels up for Scream, but 2,500, 10 minutes in? That's pretty nice.
I mean, just about everybody except for the dual lane. So I guess 3 out of the 5 players on the Scarabs have at least a 1 or 1.5 level lead. We saw Jarcorrr just now ticked over to that level 10 point, so he's nearly 2 full levels down to Scary D. All those blue buffs that Jarcorrr has not been allowed to have. Sure, 2 speed buffs went over to Scream, and that's got to feel good. That's not fun to deal with if you're the Leviathans, but for Jarcorrr to lose out on, what, 3, maybe 4 rotations of blue buffs at this point, definitely got to hurt him. And that sets up for the Scarabs to go for a Pyromancer, but as soon as that one goes down, the Leviathans have their eyes on the Gold Fury. Can the Solar Scarabs get anybody over in time? It does not seem so. Boronic does have that ultimate. It goes quite a long distance, but he doesn't have the movement speed to get there in time. So the Leviathans answer back with 1, 2 of the 9 wins. Does get Panitom, who juked right back into it.
Maybe you just, I don't know, look at the dragon, see where it's going. If it's at max range, you got time to react on where you're walking. Panitom gets that additional movement speed from the 1,000 cuts, but I suppose when you're serpentining and ending in the exact same spot, it doesn't really matter how quickly you're moving. Ronngyu pulled in, tornadoes, no good. Boronic in some trouble. No dueling dragons from Sheento, not available, so Boronic able to walk himself out of there with a relative ease. Stuart, on the other hand, just getting bullied in this lane. I think had Boronic just not cleared the mid wave and instead walked to the Gold Fury, the Scarabs probably would have been able to stop it. So that makes me think the Solar Scarabs just didn't realize the Gold Fury was pulled out.
Well, at least the Solar Scarabs have a 3-2 gold lead. We will see The return kill from Boronic, who's able to find one onto Panitom. Just throws that ult out max range, does hit the Zephyr. Panitom, I guess, thinking, oh, I'm going to juke over towards the right side. Surely that's where he's throwing it. Gives himself the extra movement speed to go right back into the damage there. So a second kill for Boronic in the mid lane. But I just got to point out, the damage that Sheento has with just this Warlock Staff and Soul Gem, pretty terrifying. Boronic got half health, and that was with 38 stacks on a Warlock Staff.
Yeah, so he's only going to get continually stronger. Another book being looked at. Could be Book of the Dead, synergized as well with the mana stack you've got already. Could also be Polynomicon, one of those OG core items for Kukulkan, giving you a bit more burst. Essentially a secondary Zephyr. Connect Zephyr, auto attack immediately afterward. You're bursting for like upwards of 1,000 once your build is finished. So I like the pathing for Boronic, but you are sacrificing a bit of penetration early on. Sure, 10% on Warlock Staff, but no flat pen, not a whole lot of CDR either. You really got to make the abilities you toss out work.
Scream finds the double taunt, but unfortunately the CC's not long enough for the Serpent of Nine Winds to connect with either Panitom or Sheento. Panitom was able to get up into that Pal-Out just in time. Scary D on the backside does find Panitom. No ult available to him any longer. Scary D does find the knockdown to Sheento. The Tornado connects with Sheento to Shell. Just enough to delay Sheento's health bar, but he does not have a safe place to land to. It's Scary D to find the first kill. Scream has that Scarab's Blessing on him. It'll be popped through. Scary D finds the double, and in the 4v2, the two tanks are sustaining with enough damage. Scream goes down, inbound, super low, but finds the abduct on a Jarcorrr for Boronic to close the kill.
Ronngyu and Jarcorrr spend the entire time fighting a tornado and de-transforming in it as well. Boronic free casting in that entire team fight puts up so much damage for his team. The Solar Scarabs come out by and large ahead. Now the gold lead starting to match up with that experience they had already established for themselves. And you were talking about it already. Zephyr is doing a whole lot of damage. Connects with Sheento for like 450 before the fight even starts. That's 30% of your mid laner's HP. From there, the Solar Scarabs clean initiation. I had honestly forgotten they had a Capri. Haven't seen a Scarab's Blessing until now, but you've been holding on to it for the right opportunity. Scream able to walk himself out of there thanks to the help from Inbound. And the Solar Scarabs' aggressive tendencies starting to pay off. The Leviathans showing some blood. They need to stem that bleeding soon.
They do so. 2,000 gold up for the Scarabs, nearly 2,500, and all of this without the Hunters really getting all that involved in this fight. Stuart 0-0-0, Zapman with a 1-0 from a fight much earlier on in the game. Haven't seen a whole lot from these two just yet. A single Fields of Love during that fight. I mean, you saw how grouped up, how crowded it was. Just at that one little rock by the red buff would have been a perfect opportunity for Zapman to get involved.
Yeah, but Stu was boxing him inside his tower the whole time. Stuart doesn't want to rotate to the fight, so he thinks to himself, how do I get involved? How do I help my team? Stopping Zapman seems pretty good, and that's exactly what happens. He even invaded Stuart, that is, the purple buff immediately afterward with that little bit of space, and now he's got the Aussie as well. Very difficult for Zapman to bully him out of the lane. So the Solar Scarabs make use of that space created by their ADC to take that team fight. I think that the answer for the Leviathans is target selection. I'm not sure that Boronic should be allowed to just stick around in these fights and end them at 100% HP.
Probably not. Stuart does go back to base, so he avoids a three-man gank on the left side of the map, but loses his tier 1 tower, so it doesn't feel good losing that bastion of safety for the Scarabs Hunter. But the Scarabs starting up a Fire Giant. Stuart's on the way. Jarcorrr has spotted this out and has made the call to everybody. The Fire Giant still being held onto. Stuart walks into the pit. A pull onto Jarcorrr will be an immediate elimination onto the solo laner. But the Scarabs are committing to the Fire Giant. They might want to commit to the fight instead. Ronngyu has walked up, will transform, but was going to be waiting for him on landing. A tornado to take him down. Not quite. The shell is not enough, but Inbound has the dot from the Rising Dawn to grab him out, and Scary in the back line. Panitom forced on the Pal-Out.
Pal-Out's up, buys himself a little bit of time, but the Solar Scarabs would love to continue this engagement. Stuart, credit for the kill, and it's just Sheento and Zapman standing nearby. The Solar Scarabs, they couldn't do the Fire Giant, but they could force the Leviathans to stop them, and in doing so, win the team fight, get a Pyromancer for themselves, might be able to reset, do it all over again. The Solar Scarabs proving, sure, these objectives are harder nowadays, but still certainly threatening enough that you have to show up and defend.
And with that one little team fight there, Stuart gets 3 extra kills to his name. Sheento loses about 70% of his health. from a full combo of Boronic. I believe a pin from Screammmmm as well. So Sheento still feeling a lot of the damage that can come through. And it is a poly that's coming out of Boronic in that third slot. So just you were saying earlier, a single Zephyr poly can connect on a Sheento, and well, you can see what it does to his health bar.
Yeah, you got to think about how much damage Boronic's going to be doing when he finishes up this next item as well. Could be Spear of the Magus. If you're an OG Kukulkan fan, that used to be the core. I think Obsidian Shard probably goes a pretty long way here as well. Bumps your percentage pen up to about 30% with the Warlock staff. I'm keeping my eyes on Boronic. His damage output is just ridiculous. 4-0-5, 9 out of 10 kills participated in by the mid laner. He's making a name for himself right now.
I wonder if he'll just completely forego a starter item as well. I mean,
Bumba's
4
hammer.
items in, could go Bumbas. We'll see what he does
That might
at
own,
the
actually.
end. But Primal Fury goes down just as quickly as it comes back up into play. Solar Scares grab another objective. They push that gold lead. Now getting close to that 5K mark, 4,500 gold. Double that in the experience. And this time around, we're only 17 minutes into the game. 9,000 experience is a massive swing. And look where most of that's at, Mifflin. Jungle and solo.
Bear with me. It is Obsidian Shard, by the way, that Boronic finishes up.
Okay.
He doesn't really have any CDR built in.
No.
Bumba's Hammer's got 20% on it. You're already weaving in your auto attacks with Polynomicon. You get like 80 more true damage on the tail end, plus some regeneration.
I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm picking up what you're throwing down.
I'm kind of loving every single bit of that, plus the CDR you get on top of just landing those auto attacks. The second off of all your cooldowns, pretty important. Already relatively low cooldowns from Zephyr. I hope it's Bumba's Hammer, man. I really do. I feel like that'd just be a treat to see.
If I'm not mistaken, extra health and mana as well from that item too, so more to stack up with the Warlock staff, more to give him power from his passive and book. You convinced me. You convinced me before I even added the extra bonus.
He's trolling if he's not building Bumbas. We've figured it out.
We've solved the mystery of what should be happening for Boronic, for Jarcorrr. He's got a tier 1 tower. He'll be fine. No chance that Screammmmm Scary D make a full dive commit to a level 16 RDO under a tower, even this late into the game. But the Solar Scarabs have once again grouped around the Fire Giant. They can easily start this pull. Screammmmm, Scary D will go up to the front line. Boronic even sitting pretty far up. Ultimate's available for everybody. That Fire Giant, even just from small poke, lost a lot of its health bar.
Scary D nearly transforms. That's an early Fields of Love. Does clip Boronic, who uses the beads.
1,000 damage out of Boronic. Scary D will keep Zapman out of his fight. Will put Zapman in the grave as well. First pick of the fight goes to the Scarabs, but it'll immediately be returned by one for Panitom. Scream goes down. A lot of damage out of Sheento. Inbound is low. Has that Scarab's Blessing. Will he use it on himself or an ally? Needs to use it to keep himself alive in the fight. The Tornado will zone away, but Scary D, by the way, is still fighting the backliners. Zapman and Sheento have not had a chance to take part in this fight, and Stuart won't have much more time on this earth. He goes down to Jarcorrr, and Inbound able to just barely squeak out until Ronngyu clips him with the hammer, but Boronic still free casting all the while. Finds a third.
Zephyr hits all 3 there. Jarcorrr and Ronngyu thinking to themselves, man, wish we killed that guy a little bit sooner. Boronic is doing just too much damage in these fights. The Leviathans may have traded out 3 for 3, and that is a value trade, make no mistake, considering how ahead the Solar Scarabs were. But now you can start sieging this tier 1 tower. Poly means you only need a couple of auto attacks to finish it off. So the Solar Scarabs tipping the scales a little bit more so in their favor. Someone's got to deal with Boronic. Someone's got to be looking at this guy, because so far nobody has, and it has been a major issue for the Leviathans. And I would argue Boronic doesn't even play that team fight perfectly. Using the beads to chase out on a Zapman, maybe not ideal. He would have been allowed to stick around a little bit more aggressively had he not done so. But even with the beads burnt, I don't think anybody saw it. Like, Zapman was fully disengaged after Fields of Love. Nobody else was nearby. The Leviathans might not know. They might just be assuming Boronic still has them.
Potentially so. Solar Scarabs. And Scary D plays that fight super well, too. I mean, he was in the backline, kept Zapman out, chased him down, ended up killing him, and then comes back in and pushes Sheento away from the team. And this is one of the first times in a while where we've seen the Leviathans backliners under real threat during a team fight. Is Scary D on this Kukulkan able to just zone out as many people, anybody that he wants to, Screammmmm, find a taunt against Jarcorrr, but that's a very healthy RDO, not so much of a healthy tower. One good poly shot does 300 damage to it. But now the Scarabs are in an awkward spot because it's a pinch in by the Leviathans. Ronngyu finds a hammer onto one. Spear of the Nine
Hold
Winds
on.
does hit Ronngyu, but only Ronngyu in that fight. Scary D, the only one under any real threat. He'll jump back to the safety of his team.
Yeah, and he's looking pretty healthy despite all the damage that was sunk into him. The Leviathans, though, have got position around the Fire Giant. Pyromancer, sure, that should go down pretty quick. No presence around the actual Fire Giant itself. The Solar Scarabs trade out tier 1 for Pyro. Leviathan's gonna have an easier time resetting themselves if they do head back towards base, but Ronngyu won't have the Dragon transformation for this next fight. Keep your eyes on Spirit of the Nine Winds. That's pretty important.
Sheento's gone from this fight. Ronngyu jumps over the wall, half HP. Zephyr just off the mark. Scary D will need another heart bomb. He did buy a full heroic teleport, gets himself right back into this team fight after nearly going down earlier on. But the Fire Giant started yet again. Boronic's got the Tornado on top. The Leviathans have got to step up to try and stop this one. Inbound will get off the Fire Giant, so we'll start to reset its HP. We can see just the objective burn that the Solar Scarabs have on this.
Kukulkan, still no ultimate available. Boronic, again, no CDR just yet. Has picked up the Bumba's Dagger and moving in towards the hammer.
Whoa.
Scary D needs some help.
Finds a knockup on only one. Heart Bomb hits but doesn't get a stun. It's a transformation out of Scary D instead. If he doesn't have that teleport for 80 seconds, this could be a major power play for the Leviathans. And you can see that they know that Scary D has to go back to base, and they're pushing forward.
Well, you can already tell how strong the disengage is from the Scarabs. All you need is to have Boronic lock down a single jungle path with tornadoes. Nobody's walking through that. It does too much damage already. And then you can just disengage through there.
There it is.
Does he finish it off?
Yep, he does.
Bumba's hammer finished up. That is a major power spike for Boronic. And just not even evaluating how it's going to enhance his auto attacks. I think it's the CDR that's more important than anything. Because you are waiting that entire team fight around the Fire Giant for his ultimate to come back up. 20% going to be so helpful. Those Zephyrs going to be more available. I'm loving what I'm seeing from this build. Slow rolling. He gets a great start to this match. All those kills got him to this point a little bit sooner. But you got to think, from an even standpoint, let's say he's 0-0-0, you're still such a long way off of this CDR. That's the double-edged sword of this style build.
5-0-6 for Boronic, 5-0-7 for Scary D. Boronic going relatively untouched in these fights. Scary D doing his best to zone the carries out and 1v1ing them as often as possible. The Solar Scarabs, not a very large lead, at least going into this team fight. Only about 3k gold. But yet another Fire Giant pull. Inbound at the front line. And a heavy commit by the Scarabs. The Suns have been dropped through. Boronic used the beads. Has that Servant of the Nine Winds. Will use it. Confirms the Fire Giant. But how about the fight after? Boronic has already used his beads. Has to juke out the chains, and he does so. Scary D in the backline. Zapman low. But the fire damage coming from Sheento is too much. It's 1-for-1 to trade out so far. But Stuart is low. Ace and beads both down. Jarcorrr in the backline. Panitom falls down. It's a double for Boronic, but more damage out of Sheento. He has been free casting the fire the whole time. Tornado will be enough to zone out Jarcorrr, and it's a 3-for-2 trade.
Boronic has tornado after tornado after tornado. I feel like I'm watching a Mario Party match. He's making just objectives you have to dodge on the map. Sheento and Zapman on the retreat. Zephyr puts him down.
Another kill for Boronic and maybe one for Stuart if he can find the auto. He does so. It's a full deicide of the Leviathans. The Solar Scarabs keep 3 alive and with the Fire Giant.
Boronic lost his beads at the start of that fight, but major fumble from Panitom may have cost the Leviathans the entirety of the fight. If Pal connects, Boronic's dead. There's no words to mince. There's no nuance to think about. He's just dead there with a grouping from the Leviathans. And even with that poor engagement, the Leviathans have hero plays from Sheento that keep them afloat in the engagement. Scream and Scary D both rooted multiple times by Sheento's Cultivate Dao. The damage output from this Huang even rivaling Boronic's already. And that's with Huang and Sheento and the Leviathans behind and being accosted in these engagements. Boronic is free casting. Insane what Sheento's been able to do with minimal space handed to him. But now the Solar Scarabs with Fire Giant on 3 can start up their siege, and you gotta think it's just gonna be strong.
Yeah, I mean, beads are used to make sure that he has the ult to secure Fire Giant, and now we're gonna watch him juke away from 2 different chains. Nice little side steps to get away from Panitom, then turning around to pick up a kill during that fight. Those poly procs going through, the tornado damage. The res from Inbound to get Scary D back in that fight as well, because Scary D, one of the only ones to live through at the end of that. Boronic, full HP, by the way, this entire way through, just not under the same level of threat that the carries are of the Leviathans.
God, did you look at the timers on Tornado, by the way? Were you seeing how
Yeah.
quickly those are coming back up? By the way, Panitom walked into a Tornado that was already out. That's what cost him his life. Check back in with the match itself. The Solar Scarabs have already broken down the towers on the left-hand side. Phoenix, not exactly the gold just yet, so instead, reset yourselves, spend up that gold, get ready, and start moving in towards these tier 2 towers. The Leviathans, the goal has always been, at least I've thought the goal was, to shut down Boronic, make sure he isn't free casting these team fights. Hasn't happened just yet. 15 affected kills of the 18 for the Solar Scarabs, topping the damage charts. Well, actually beat out by Scary D.
Barely.
I'm thinking Scary D got the Soul Laner thing, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce that by 5,000.
Oh, okay.
Now Boronic's winning. And also like Zephyr plus auto attack's going to bump you up by upwards of 1,000 every single time, and your Zephyr's on like a 2-second cooldown because of Bumba's Hammer. This is a gross build. And with Soul Reaver too?
Soul Reaver, it's just about to say.
He's about to own, man.
Yeah, triple book, so every single one of those, plus the Bumba's Hammer. The only item in his, well, I guess there's 2 items in his build, not benefiting his passive, is the Warlock Staff and the Obsidian Shard, but everything else just continuing to balloon out of control between the Book of Thoth passive, giving him more, his own internal passive, giving him more. Boronic's build is just absolutely disgusting to deal with. All we need to see now is a Fire Giant buff on him, which he has, and then throw a red buff and a red pot on there. This man's going to be swinging for probably the entirety of a carry's health bar with just a Zephyr or just a Zephyr Poly proc combo. Scream goes in the back line, finds 2 with the taunt, but eats a lot of damage back in response. Scary D finds 2 with his ult, rooted under the tower, and we'll have to jump away. For now, the Scarabs need to disengage.
Panitom eats a Zephyr, and just a Zephyr for 20% of his HP, but Scary D needs some peel.
Wow.
Tornadoes, that's a tank, by the way, Jarcorrr.
A root onto Jarcorrr, who got stuck inside. Panitom gets to the back line. Pow Lao, how many can he find? Boronic speed's gone, Stuart speed's gone. Panitom lands back in, and Spirit of the Nine Winds will clip the Aegis of Sheento, who will be out of the fight for now, but Ronngyu, so low in HP, jumps back in, up against Boronic, Aegis out of Boronic, will keep him alive, and a Scarab's Blessing to make sure he lives through, but Panitom wants that kill, will proc the revive a little too early, and Stuart turns it around.
The Solar Scarabs still on the retreat, have not got Fire Giant any longer, but Panitom dead for an entire minute, head in hands for the Leviathan's jungler. Just unfortunate timing on that dash, and the Trickster Spirit was good. The idea was good, and he was maybe microseconds away of actually finding the kill onto Boronic, and that is a value trade. Anyone killing Boronic right now has done their job. I don't care if you're trading Zapman, Sheento, Jarcorrr, and maybe even any 2 members of the Leviathans. It would have been value, but instead, Panitom comes up empty-handed, and the Solar Scarabs can look towards another fire.
438 is how much a Polyproc is doing to Fire Giant right now. Boronic is swinging with damage, and
he might be able to
nobody
it.
On the Leviathans are going to be able to show up to stop this one. He's just throwing poly shots just because he can. I guess getting some extra one of those cooldown resets.
Wait for
It's taking a while. They are waiting for the enhanced, and they will get it there. So Solar Scarabs, with their second Fire of the Giant of the game, and this one being enhanced, only 2 towers left to defend, Mifflin. How does the Siege defense even work out for Leviathans against this?
It's all about whether or not you can get towards these targets, right? Because as far as a war of attrition is concerned, Boronic's going to walk up Zephyr auto attack on repeat, and he's got the safety net of Scarab's Blessing. So I think it's got to be an initiation spearhead style defense from the Leviathans. I'm keeping my eyes on Jarcorrr, and I'm keeping my eyes on Sheento. Jarcorrr for the initiation, the engage, and Sheento for the dueling dragons. If you can find a multi-man pull-in, that's massive. Just able to displace Boronic, Stuart, even Scream, he's pretty squishy as of now, would be so important for the Leviathans. And the Solar Scarabs have likely taken notice of that. So imagine we see them slow play it, as they've got just about 3 minutes with this Fire Giant buff to start working through the remaining towers and phoenixes of the Leviathans. I'm excited to watch it. It's high execution from both of these teams. But the answer, and it's the answer we came up with 20 minutes ago for the Leviathans, has not changed. Someone's got to kill Boronic.
Doug, real quick, since now we have enhanced red buff, enhanced Fire Giant,
He's
a red
power
potion
capped.
on Boronic, can we just see what Boronic's damage number, what his magical power currently is? It's got to be close to 1,000. 1,001.
Is
That's
the cap
gross.
900? I know buffs take you over, but like the cap itself is 900. He's there.
He is beyond that. I think the only time I've seen something higher was a Zeus at one point with like the full book build and then like a Seer of the Jungle or something like that. And I think he had a red elixir too, but absolutely gross that this man is sitting on 1,000 magical power going into this last team fight. The Leviathans have got to keep check on where Boronic is in these fights. Those Aegises need to be on point from Zapman and Sheento because those are their only saving graces in this fight.
Every single ultimate available and every single relic up as well. 3-2 split for the Solar Scarabs and the same for the Leviathans. Slow playing these Phoenixes. All you need to do is connect one polyproc on the bird, reset, rinse, repeat, and you'll slowly, oh, not even slow, already down to half, burn them away.
I mean, a 300 polyproc just on Ronngyu, and that's the tank, by the way, who mitigates the majority of that damage back through. Inbound will tank up the Phoenix a little bit.
Good
More
Lord.
damage onto Ronngyu, and a Fields of Love completely negated. Zapman doesn't get any value from there, and instead eats a 700 Zephyr to his own skull, and the Phoenix goes down with basically no contest. Taunted on towards Jarcorrr, Spirit 9 wins. A little bit early there, doesn't find anybody, but it does force the Leviathans to retreat.
So beads lost for Jarcorrr only at the cost of Scream and Boronic's ultimate. Boronic will have it back up a little bit more quickly than last time we'd seen it used in the exact same situation, but you gotta think the Solar Scarabs have got a slow play, about 35 seconds left until Spirit of the Nine Winds is back up. You could still poke and prod on this Phoenix, but your ability to finish off some of these kills has been severely hampered. I'm not so certain Boronic's concerned about it. If it's a squishy Zephyr plus auto doing like 60% on their own, might as well play
in the back line. Will force Sheento up into the sky. The Phoenix, the target of the Solar Scarabs. Panitom tries to find anybody with the Pal out, but Boronic and Stuart are undeterred, and Scary D finds a kill on his own in the back. Zapman is dead. Panitom is dead. Stuart finds another one. A root holds Ronngyu in the midst of the Suns, and the Solar Scarabs have the damage output to just take down this Titan. Scary D and Stuart find yet another. Sheento dies in the backline for the first and last time as Scary D puts him down, and the Solar Scarabs with a triple on Stuart stop the reign of the Leviathans, the reigning world champs who came back from a 1-2 start of this season, make a 3-0 comeback in their last few sets, and the Scarabs find that win that they have been so desperately needing.
Game 3 curse broken for the Solar Scarabs. Meta might be broken as well. Expect to see a whole lot more Kukulkan in your games because that was a dominant performance from Boronic, the mid laner, and we knew that was something he was capable of all the way back since the console league days. This has been a player that has been honing his craft for a very long time, and it's always a treat to watch the Solar Scarabs. They're always devising new and fun strategies. I didn't expect a build like that from Kukulkan. I didn't expect a performance like that from him either. But the Scarabs bring it out, and they make it look good.
Again, it's hard to win games when these carries are going untouched. Boronic gets to free cast for pretty much the entirety of that game, and it helps bring the Solar Scarabs a win in game number 3. That's it from us on the cast. We'll throw it to the desk to close out the set.
The SPL is officially flipped all around. The Leviathans just last week beat the 2 undefeated teams we had in the league, put themselves in the conversation as the best team in the league. And then the Solar Scarabs this week, a team who have struggled traditionally in Game 3s, who have only beaten the Valkyries, then take down that Leviathans team we were just talking about. I can't figure it out, but what I can figure out is the Scarabs were on it in their 2 wins here in this set. Game 1 and Game 3 were some very clean SMITE from the Solar Scarabs team. And this is SMITE that this team should be excited about, and if Scary D's words are to be believed, maybe momentum building for this squad. Lots to break down here. Gormizer is with me to talk all things Game 3 and all things Scarabs versus Leviathans. And a monumentous win to end the halfway point in the phase.
I mean, not just to end the halfway point in the phase for them, but 6 sets up to this point, up to today, 6 sets played between these two teams. It was 6-0 in favor of the Leviathans. The Scarabs has a team, again, games have taken a couple. This is the first set they've been able to take off of the Leviathans ever in the last 2 years. So that is a huge boon to them. And like, this was a beautiful game number 3, right? You look at the way that they play, man, and you are just unworried. I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. I think Scary D is just absolutely obnoxious in the backline. Again, a lot of good setup, a lot of good dive. And early on, a lot of fights from the Leviathans where, you know, there's conversations, I think, about specifically 2 players on the Scarabs, but this has to be one of them, which is just, why is this guy able to just run in there and get away with it? I mean, why is he able to stick to them so easily? Why is no one peeling? Why is no one helping? And then, of course, you get a lot of good saves. I like seeing them here from Inbound that really do enable the team to keep going the way that they did. But all of that, I think even with the 15.0 KDA, the amount of damage, the 28k Scary D puts up is absolutely insane, but you have to look at the mid laner as well, and you can see it in a lot of these highlights. The double kill for Boronic, 14.5, but 34.5k damage out there. I mean, untouched. I mean, there were too many fights where he's walking out, and sometimes without having to burn relics. He's getting good ults, good tornadoes, good kills, and a majority of the time is back here. And the one time that it feels like they finally found that success, they finally get the mid laner, they force Boronic's beats, they forced his Aegis, they forced the Scarab's Blessing early, and then unfortunately it was an early proc from Panitom that ends up giving him the res and just kind of resurging the Scarabs forward. I think otherwise you take that as a small win for the Leviathans, but otherwise you've got this guy who's sitting back here doing nothing. And again, that's highlighting just the 2 people who felt like they were untouched, and admittedly Scary D's going to be taking a lot of damage. And you got a lot of free firing there from Boronic. Everybody there on the Scarabs just played lights out. But I have to be honest that I see the 8-0 and 13. My eyes are drawn to one place. I think Stuart, though, look, 7-1 and 7, nothing to scoff at. Everybody stepped up this game. And again, it was a draft that I thought was going to be a little shaky. I thought they were going to have some struggles. And not once did they have to face that. There was even a point where Boronic didn't use his beads, didn't have to use the Aegis. Paolau's coming down. He just dodged 3 chains like it was nothing. And in that moment, that was like the solidifying moment for me where I was like, oh, this game's over. Like, there's no coming back from something like that. And it was, I think, another 10 minutes or so afterward, but it was just so well played by this. I
mean, such a clean 3-game set of Smite, even with a stumble in game 2. That's going to happen. When you're playing up against the talent that you have in the SPL, of course you want a 2-0, right? Who doesn't? But being able to bounce back from what was otherwise a brutal game in game 2 to then stay calm, win the game 3, gotta be a big moment here for the Solar Scarabs team. Literally turning a corner not only in the phase, going downhill stretch to the end, but mentally for the Scarabs, matchup-wise as well. Lots to look forward to for this team. Boronic plays the Kukulkan in game number 3, gets over 1,000 power by the end of that game, goes undying, and is now standing by with me for the post-game interview. Boronic, talk to me a little bit. Look, it's been a long half. We're officially at the turning point of the phase now. You've played every team once. You go to 3 games against everyone except for the Kings. As a team, how discussions been about the whole game, the game 3 thing? I mean, you got to feel like at some point you're going to grab the win. Is that something that's been difficult for you guys, or you realize that eventually you'll get those wins rolling?
I think whether we would like to admit ourselves, I mean, at least for me, I was always confident in our ability. Yeah. I think, I mean, it's just the same trend as last year, I feel, basically. Right. So we just got to keep working hard. And, yeah. I
think there's something to take away from the fact that against every other team, you can take the games, you can get yourself to those game 3. So it feels good, I think, to finally get that win. Talk to me a bit. We have to ask about the Kukulkan build. Yeah. You get over 1,000 power there in game 3. Is this all you're doing? Are you theory crafting here?
It was something I just kind of like cooked up. I think me and Peter cooked up in scrims, and it like I don't think I lost a single game out of like a few times I played it. So I was like, you know what, this weekend it might have its time to shine, you know.
Do you think that style of build as meta breaking as like the Robin damage mitigation style?
Not really. It's just a copy of like, I mean, the double stack Bumbas is like a very common build, but I think even like Venenu has done it. Sure. So it's not like it's like something new, but
works on Kukulkan.
Definitely very good. Well. Bumbas hammer.
Well, look, excited for you guys. Yeah. You get the game 3 win. Turning point, I think, for the Scarab squad, and of course in the phase, get to play everyone else one more time. Thanks for your time. Congrats on the win, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you.
So our Scarabs notched themselves a win over the Atlantis Leviathans, and I think lots to take away from a set like that, Gore. Of course, for the Solar Scarabs, we got to talk about the Leviathans a bit as well, but also I think you got to zoom out and just talk about the SPL and just the Smite Pro League in general so far here in Season 9 and, of course, in Phase 2. Here's a look back at the 5 sets we've already had this weekend. A bunch of Game 3s. Only Leviathans Valks go 2. And the Solar Scarabs able to break that Game 3 curse, get the win over the Atlantis Leviathans. And we got Camelot Kings and Oni Warriors and Jade Dragons and Titans to end our day. Something tells me that's not going to be the only 3-game set we've got today.
No, I think honestly, you could tell me all 3 are going to go 3, and I would not be surprised with the way things are going. I'm still perplexed. Not only was that just a really good set, games 1 and 3 from the Scarabs there were really well played. Again, game 1, there was maybe a little shakiness for the first like 15-ish minutes, but even then, when they got that one team fight, things from there on out were clean. But you're talking about a team that up to this point, they had 3 other squads since the SPL has been franchised that they had not taken a set against. Again, games, whatever, but being able to get a win against the Leviathans after having essentially a year and a half of never beating them has to feel monumental for them. And honestly, I'm looking forward to how they ride this wave.
Right. Again, if we're going back to that Scary D interview, we're a team that's built off momentum. I think Scary D turned the clock back a bit there in that set.
Yeah,
one of the best solo lane performances we've seen from Scary D. Can't gush enough over the Solar Scarabs and what we saw in games 1 and 3 here in this set, and that's all you got. Got to win a game 1, win a game 3, and you win the set, and that's what the Solar Scarabs are able to get done. That is only our first set of the day. We've got some incredible Smite still to be played, including Camelot Kings versus Oni Warriors, which is coming up next.